Welcome back to day 2 of our Precision Medicine Initiative workshop. I'm going to kick us off quickly and sort of give you an overview of our morning together and then turn it over to Dr. Collins to introduce our special guest this morning. So yesterday we talked a lot about the risks and benefits of using existing resources in order to tap healthcare delivery systems and existing research cohorts and bringing those into the precision medicine cohort. We talked about challenges and opportunities for data sharing across institutions and how important that will be to the success of the cohort, not only data sharing amongst researchers, but also data sharing with the individual participants. And then we had, I thought, a very important and provocative conversation about inclusion of underrepresented minorities and underserved populations in the cohort and the particular opportunities and challenges that provides in terms of how are we going to do that, how are we going to make that happen. Yesterday we had almost 1,000 tweets. We had 288 Twitter participants. We had many impressions, which I now actually know what means. And we had a number of people who were watching on the webcast, and we have people tuning in today as well on the webcast, and that will be archived at the Precision Medicine Initiative webpage at the NIH. So feel free to go back and review these really important talks that you'll hear again today. So today, we're going to have a special guest, Representative Marsha Blackburn, speak with us, and then we're going to talk about core data elements that we need for the cohort and where they currently live. We're going to talk and continue really the conversation about possibilities for getting information directly from participants rather than getting participant data through some intermediary, whether it be a healthcare system or something else. Then we're going to have a conversation about the advantages and challenges of a centralized versus a federated data model, and this has been also a recurring question and one that I think will persist for some time until we really settle on what will be the data architecture for the cohort as we move forward. And then we will wrap up, and after that we will be, the working group will have a closed working group meeting in which we will consider all of the great input that you all have provided to us over the course of the last day and a half, and then start to really fasten into some of the key decisions that we need to be able to make in order to have our report to the advisory committee in September. So with that, I will turn the podium over to Dr. Collins to introduce our special guest.
Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the second day of what is a very important and very intense discussion as part of this series of 4 workshops to help us by September to lay out the design of this remarkably bold initiative to have 1 million or more, maybe, Americans enrolled in an enterprise where they're full participants and where we aim through collection of information about genomics and electronic health records, wearable sensors, and everything else to really transform the landscape of our understanding of how it is that people are able to maintain health, or how we can best manage a wellness so that it happens to more of us, and if chronic disease happens, how we can best manage that as well. This will provide a platform for answering questions that otherwise we won't be able to answer, and so it's of a great significance and great excitement that we've arrived at this point. And I want to thank again our hosts here at Vanderbilt for making it possible for us to meet here in Nashville. We had a great day yesterday across the way, and now we're in a different space, but I think also a nice cozy place where we can have serious informal conversations. And I hope, just like yesterday, that will be the case today, where there's lots of opportunity for discussion and people are getting up on their feet to the microphones and posing questions and really trying to drive this discussion into an area that's going to help us with the design of this effort in the best possible way. I've also enjoyed Nashville for another reason, because yes, I did get to go to the Bluebird Cafe last night at the 9 o'clock show where there were 4 wonderful singer-songwriters sitting in a circle while the rest of us sat and listened to their original music, which was really amazingly impressive. And yes, it was also somewhat unexpected to be asked to join that circle and produce a song myself, which I did. And I don't know if that'll turn up on YouTube. I kind of hope it doesn't, because I got a little tangled up in the bridge there in this song that I wrote about disease. You go to the Bluebird and sing about disease. Now, does that make sense? But anyway, Senator Alexander, who is my host, seemed to think it was okay, and so I guess I'm going to breathe a sigh of relief. But what a great town this is, and what a wonderful experience we all have had being here. And again, thanks to our colleagues at Vanderbilt who are so strong in this area academically and have made it possible for us to meet here. Well, another nice thing about coming to Tennessee is we get a chance outside the Beltway to meet with elected representatives who are in important positions here in terms of what may happen in terms of congressional support for what we're here to talk about, this precision medicine initiative. And yesterday we had the privilege of having Senator Lamar Alexander with us, and he had a very interesting time and was quite complimentary to all of you that he had a chance to chat with yesterday. And today we are very fortunate to have Representative Marsha Blackburn, who is the elected representative from the 7th District of Tennessee, a district which I gather stretches all the way from Nashville to Memphis, if you can imagine that. So she must put a lot of miles on her car in order to be able to have a chance to meet with all of these constituents. So she's elected to the House in 2002 and has been continuously serving the nation in that role since then. So that's a long stretch of dedication. Before that, she was in the Tennessee State Senate. She currently serves as the vice chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee in the House of Representatives, a very important committee because that is the authorizing committee for NIH, and it is the committee in which the 21st Century Cures Initiative has been getting formulated under the leadership of her and Fred Upton, who is the chair, and Frank Pallone, who is the ranking member. And a lot of interesting things have happened over the course of the last year, preparing for a piece of legislation that now passed out of full committee unanimously. Can you imagine that? Maybe she'll tell us a little bit more about how that came to be, because that's not the sort of thing that happens these days. She also has played an important leadership role in other ways, ensuring that children are adequately represented in biomedical research, an effort that she sponsored along with co-sponsor Lois Capps. I might also mention she's co-founder of the Congressional Songwriters Caucus, and I know they appreciated that when I met with some of those folks last night, because they're all worried about whether songwriters have a future in the current circumstance where everything goes on the internet, whether you want it to or not. I just want to say, in terms of 21st Century Cures, NIH has been involved in this by getting many requests for input and technical advice, and we're very pleased to see the way in which this has been developing, and lots of features in there that are relevant to what we're talking about here, including giving the NIH director additional authorities about insisting on data access, which is something we think is going to be fundamental and important to all of this. So we really do want to express our thanks to Representative Blackburn and all of those who have been putting this together in a thoughtful way and seeking input all across the way. I've personally been involved in no less than 4 hearings and roundtables, including a couple outside of Washington, sort of preparing for this, and numerous staff conversations. And that kind of approach where really the Congress is looking for that kind of input and acting on it over a thoughtful, deliberative process has been great to see. So, without taking any more of her time, let me ask you, please, to give a warm welcome to Representative Marsha Blackburn of the 7th District of Tennessee.
Thank you so much, and I am absolutely thrilled to be able to stop by this morning and to welcome the NIH here and to publicly thank both Kathy and Dr. Francis for how they have worked with us and our team as we have pulled together 21st Century Cures. And as Dr. Collins said, we've passed this unanimously out of the House committee. It goes to the floor of the House in June. We expect that it is going to have over 350 votes out of the 435 when it gets to the House. And it will then go over to the Senate under Senator Alexander's capable leadership. And we're excited about it. We anticipate that it is going to move forward rather quickly. And it is something that will be signed into law. Now, just on background and kind of how we arrived at this. One of the things that Chairman Upton and I, in leading the Energy and Commerce Committee, as we looked at what we wanted to do and what we wanted to accomplish, and looked at the cost of healthcare delivery and of Medicaid services and Medicare services, then what you do is begin to look at where are the high cost areas and kind of where are the holes, what are the problems that need to be solved. Now, one of those was looking at Alzheimer's. And you say, okay, this is something that is costing our economy or our country in healthcare costs $215 billion a year. And you have 10,000 individuals per day turning 65. And you begin to look at what this is going to do. Putting money into Alzheimer's research is something that needed to be done. How do you solve that problem? How do you address that problem? What are the barriers to entry for research into solving this problem? So that is kind of the type process that we as legislators were following in deciding where we were going to put our time and our effort and energy. And we feel like that it is time for our nation to begin to embrace a cures strategy. And looking at wellness, looking at disease management, looking at outcomes, looking at higher quality of life, kind of flipping this on its head and making certain that we were focusing on solving these health care and these health issue problems. So because of that, we decided to begin to look more at precision medicine, look at what was tracking with personalized medicine. And I tell you, I've got to give a tremendous amount of credit to Dr. Karen Summer, who is our health policy director and has spent time here at Vanderbilt before coming to DC, doing an NIH fellowship, and then coming into our office as the health policy director. She has worked so closely with Dr. Collins' team and with Senator Alexander's team and our team at Energy and Commerce Committee in talking about what would work and what would help to bring forward new products and therapies and innovations that are going to lead to the outcome that we would all like to have. So we think that we have seeded this, if you will, in the right place. And Congressman Diana DeGette, who is out of Colorado, led the team for the Democrats, and Chairman Upton led the team for the Republicans, and we have all worked together for a year and a half to get this to the point that, as Dr. Collins said, it was kind of one of those freaks of nature, if you will, in Washington, D.C., that you have a bill move out of committee, unanimous voice vote. So that is what we've done. I had the opportunity to brag a little bit this week on Vanderbilt and what you are doing and some of the research work that is taking here when I was up at Oak Ridge National Labs, and talk some about what they're looking to do moving into their interest in participating with some precision medicine and some innovation, and then also to talk about the opportunities that exist for us here in Tennessee, as I yesterday addressed the Tennessee Valley Corridor and their Economic and Energy Summit. So we appreciate what you all are doing and what it means not only to our community but to our country and thereby globally as we try to solve some of these problems. Kathy mentioned data, and I want to start there and talk just a little bit. I know you all are going to look at, you had some privacy concerns. This is something that we also are addressing, and Congressman Peter Welch, who's out of Vermont, and I have led the Privacy and Data Security Working Group. This has been a 2-year project, and you can go to the Energy and Commerce Committee website or to Congressman Welch's website or mine, blackburn.house.gov, and get a little bit of background on what we have done there. We have a data security bill that will go to the House floor before long. It is going to deal with breach notifications, data security standards, put the FTC in charge of overseeing data security and breach notification. It will carve out health information and not exercise preemption over that, but leave health information with the states for the time being. Everything else will be under federal preemption because we've got data security laws. 47 different states have 47 different varieties of data security laws. We are going to come back and address healthcare information when we get into the point of opening up HIPAA. So until that point in time, we're going to leave that with the states. So this is going to be something you will see us take up, but you're going to see first the data security, then we'll do privacy, we'll come back and we'll address the health components, and then you'll see us move into the cyber end, where we will divide that process also and look at control systems. This is important to the energy community, and then look at enterprise systems and put some cyber components that are in place there. I know there's a lot to be decided, transfer rights, things of that nature. So putting in place the appropriate work we think is important. As I said, we worked on this in a bipartisan working group for a 2-year period of time before we brought out a discussion draft. But at Energy and Commerce, we have felt like that's the most effective way to get the job done and make certain that we have something that is going to get signed into law and then, if necessary, would stand court challenges. So do stay in touch with us on that. 21st Century Cures. There are proposals inside this bill, and it really is quite comprehensive, that are going to help CMS, NIH, FDA, and CDC. We know that it will enable them to utilize new technologies, and we are excited about that. We want to encourage new ideas, and we think that it's important to allow incorporation of new delivery systems as we look at research and innovation. So this is going to incentivize young investigators so that they're going to get out there and help solve some of these problems. I will say we have worked diligently, and again, we appreciate the time that Dr. Collins' team has spent with us. We've been able to offset the cost on this and are continuing to work with the Budget Committee. I represent Energy and Commerce at the Budget Committee to offset the cost on this so that we're going to have maybe $10 billion that are new dollars that are going to be available to help incentivize this process. But we're doing this in a revenue-neutral manner. We think that's important to do. And it means shifting our priorities, but I think every one of you would say it's time for those priorities to shift. And so we are doing that within this legislation. Let me touch on 3 pieces that my team and I have really taken the lead on and have crafted. First of all, the Software Act is embodied in here. Now, Congressman Gene Green out of Texas has been my partner in this legislation, and believe it or not, we're on the 18th draft before we brought out the bill. But what this will do is work with the FDA and instruct them on how health IT should be addressed by the FDA. And the regulatory framework that exists at the FDA right now would approach this as a medical device. And as you all know, in the 30s, we defined what a drug is. In the 70s, we defined a medical device. And we think that now it is appropriate that we define what is a health technology, a medical technology, and that a proper framework be put in place. So Congressman Green and I have spent about 3 years as we have worked on these provisions. And we know that we've got to have some things that are flexible, that are going to be workable and usable. Things that are going to have a life or death consequence, absolutely. Implants, things of that nature, all of that is going to need to go to the FDA. But many of the mHealth apps that are for information collecting, that are EMRs, that are instructive and that required a learned intermediary, those do not need to be going to the FDA. They need to go to the marketplace. So you will see this tiered structure, and this is embodied now in the 21st Century Cures bill. So in order to help you with research and with clinical trials, you're going to be able to utilize these apps, recruit people, follow research participants, and then we will address the oversight of it on a risk-based strategy. We also included, I had rewritten the authorization for the Reagan-Udall Foundation, and we've put that into this bill. And as you all know, the foundation works with the FDA by looking at new study designs, new statistical methods, and other methods to really help the FDA and encourage them to keep current with new utilizations as they do their work. Dr. Collins mentioned the Children Count Act, and this is something that Representative Lois Capps, who is out of California, Representative Capps and I worked closely with NIH on this. And what we want to do is to quantify the number of children who are participating in NIH-funded studies. And that number is going to be reported by developmental age. And we should be able to know how many infants are in studies as well as how many seniors are in studies. So you will see the Children's Count Act included in that. We are so encouraged by what we are hearing from researchers on this legislation. You know, we think that this is kind of the moonshot, if you will, for today, for the 21st century. And this is a way that we can certainly get around and achieve the goal of better outcomes, better quality of life, shorter recovery periods, more intense and focused disease management, which will help us through this entire process. So thank you all so much. I appreciate being with you. And Dr. Collins, I'm back to you. Yes. Sure.
Questions?
Sure, happy
People
to.
might have a few questions. Maybe I'll start out. You mentioned the $10 billion, which is part of the 21st Century Cures, and which has been a great source of encouragement to the medical research community, especially after the sort of 12-year period that we've been on since 2003 of losing ground in terms of resources. So we're down now about 23% below where we were 2003. And this $10 billion stretched out over 5 years would be an enormous boon to getting us back on a stable pathway. And I know that has been challenging to come up with a way to do that without adding to the deficit. So can you just give us a sense of your level of optimism that that's actually going to survive what is clearly a lot more steps in the process?
Well, I think it will survive.
Oh, good.
And yes. No, I really do think it will survive. And we have worked, and Chairman Upton and Representative Pallone deserve a tremendous amount of credit on working this through. Well, yes, Diana DeGette and I both, yes. we deserve credit. We deserve credit too. But what we did was to find places where we could reposition money and then refocus money. And we're going to continue to work on this. Chairman Price at the Budget Committee is a physician. And so we've worked with him. He understands the need of research, of innovation, and so figuring out how to do this so that you're going to come out with a revenue neutral position was important to do. But I think if I went around this room and I said, how many of you think the processes and the policies, some of the rules at CMS are outdated, every hand in this room would probably go up. And as you require the usage and the integration of new technologies, there are savings that can be quantified and money then that can be repositioned during this budget window. So we're not through yet. We think that there are some other things that we're going to put on the table and be able to utilize. And I was just mentioning to Dr. Collins some of those that we're going to come back and revisit, take another look at, because it's time to do that. We cannot continue to act like it's 1965. So it's time to update some of this. And the research work many of you will do will bring about better outcomes and efficiencies and therefore save some dollars, and we think that's the right track.
I think Dr. O'Rourke had a hand up.
Hi.
Push. One thing to hit and I've missed it. I'm intrigued by your plans for looking at the privacy issues. And the way I understand it, you said for the first go, the states will still handle health information. And as we're talking about the Precision Medicine Initiative, the definition of health information expands. And so I'm intrigued as to how you define health information, and will this also help us accessing insurers' data, both at the federal level as well as private insurers? I mean, it's no longer just your medical record.
Exactly.
Lots of stuff.
You know, and I will say this, I can't say this is the 1, 2, 3 of what we're going to do. We're not there yet. And as we have worked the past couple of years, like I said, we've been digging into this for 2 years, and it's like it gets bigger. You know, the issue gets bigger. And then you look at what is considered health information. Healthcare.gov, opened up all of that. Well, some of the questions that were being asked, yes, that does relate to healthcare. Now, the other question that is coming into play in this entire discussion, and I don't have the answer for it, but it's an issue we're going to put on the table. Who owns your health records? Out of everything that you are discussing, who owns that? Is it the doctors, the insurance companies, your employers, and is it you? That's exactly right. And as we have held our hearings and worked through the privacy issues, which are one bucket, the data security issues, which are another bucket, I coined a term, for lack of a better one, which is the virtual you. And who owns you in your presence online? And then you get into how these health records are held and how the individual wants to utilize that, hold it, secure it, and then have a toolbox of options where they can allow access to that. Then for research purposes, as we were discussing, yesterday at Tennessee Valley Corridor and the day before at ORNL, then how do you have the right assurances in the wrapper around this information so that people know, yes, this is anonymized? Then how do you allow individuals that want to choose to opt in to try the right to try legislation that has been popular here in Tennessee? And I think, quite frankly, we will see that at the federal level. You know, I would encourage you to stay in touch with us on this. As you will hear from Kathy and Dr. Collins, our team needs this kind of input. And we welcome it, and we actually, and I think this is one of the reasons 21st Century Cures is so well seated as it leaves the House, pardon me, and moves to Senator Alexander in the Senate, is because we don't know the answers, but we've talked this all through to come to a point on a certain bucket of issues, and then we'll come back and we'll use the same process for the next bucket of issues.
We have questions there and there.
Okay, great.
Brad Mallon from Vanderbilt University. Sincerely appreciate you coming out this morning. One question that I'm wondering about is the extent to which the Federal Trade Commission should be in control of the entire process versus HHS. And right now we have a situation that if you leave the control of the health information at the state level, not only do we have FTC in control of most commerce, you have HHS in control of health, and now you have the states all control of at the local level.
The data security and breach notification, all of that has historically been with the FTC in the physical world. And then HIPAA is where health information is. Basically what we're saying is we're going to handle this with financial information, the FTC, leave things as they have been in the physical world, transfer that to the virtual space. That bucket stays over there. Then HIPAA stays with healthcare. The states that have it stays as it is.
Right, and my question is why? So why do we keep
because
allowing for
we think
power
that's a
attacks?
bigger bucket. We need to come back and give greater attention to that so that we get it right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Rick Lifton's had his hand up for a minute.
Congressman Blackburn, thanks very much. Very exciting about the 21st Century Cures. I think this work is entirely predicated upon the understanding that there's this great continuum in this country that goes from incredible basic science to understanding the fundamental causes of disease, and that defines the opportunities for the cures that we're thinking about today. In the particular case of Alzheimer's disease, the major understanding that beta amyloid and that pathway is intrinsically involved in the causation of disease relies on the previous 50 years of basic science that enabled the discovery that patients with early onset forms of this disease have mutations that are causing the disease in that pathway. And that's setting up the opportunity for this best shot on goal, if you will, for the future. Which gets me around to the point that as we think about cures, we're totally dependent on understanding the basic science that is underlying the cause of disease. And it's important in thinking about the future of NIH that we not leave the fundamental basic science behind, that the investments that we've made over the last 2 generations in basic science have led us to where we are today.
Absolutely.
And we need to be looking to the future for what we're going to leave for the subsequent generations.
Yes, and I agree with you. And what is so interesting, I was at Eastman yesterday morning in Kingsport and met with their leadership team. And they had something there in just basic science research, chemical research, that they had done that they felt like may have an application in the field of healthcare. And we're going to reach out. I said, how exciting for us here in Tennessee to kind of be the work that you all are doing here. When I was in the state Senate, I put forward legislation and we established the Biotech Council here in the state. That was, 15 years ago now? And then you look at the research at ORNL, the research work that is being done up at in East Tennessee. With Eastman, you look what is happening with Memphis Bio, the Life Sciences Center, where Vanderbilt participates, something that I did when I was in the state senate, again, that is there in Cool Springs. And we have a very nice cluster working with Hudson Alpha down in Huntsville. We just have a very nice cluster here, a very dedicated, focused, smart people who are very committed to solving these problems. And I tell people all the time, I say, look, we're not going to solve these questions, find the answers to the questions and solve the problems here in D.C. It is going to happen in places like Nashville, Tennessee, where we're going to see that work take place.
So just in that context, one of the reasons we're here today is thinking about the future, and the project that we're in the process of discussing and laying out is thinking not just about cures, but about identifying factors that would predict future disease and allow us in the future to actually prevent diseases from developing in the first place, which obviously would have profound implications for the cost and
we agree,
impact
and
on
that's
health.
why, as I said, this is how the strategy all developed. In our committee, Congressman Barton, Congressman Pitts, Congressman Burgess, who's also a physician. Everybody has been so engaged on this. It really has been a collaborative effort from both sides of the aisle to produce a product that says, let's deal with the big questions. Yeah.
Two more questions.
Sure. I'm Paul Bleischer from Optum Labs, and I'm a serial entrepreneur who's been involved in developing medical software for the last 2 decades. And I was very interested in your comments about the FDA, and specifically I think there is great value in creating structure around what is regulated and what isn't regulated, and clarity. I applaud you for that. On the other hand, the medical software industry and medical innovation around technology that isn't devices has a very different pace and funding and style than pharmaceutical companies and and device companies. And the FDA's approach of user fees and slow regulation could be extremely stifling for the industry. So what guardrails and other things are you putting into the bill so that there isn't overreach by the FDA or misinterpretation, let's say, by the FDA?
Exactly,
I don't want to say misinterpretation.
Well, no, that's exactly why this came to be. Talking. That's it, right? That guy from Duke who now is at the FDA. Yeah, so we'll point all the fingers at him.
I think that's the end of my software development career.
This is exactly what led us to do this.
Okay.
Talking to entrepreneurs and innovators who were saying, hey, I'm confused about this. There's this thing over here at the FCC, and it's called net neutrality, and paragraph 84 says if I'm going to innovate something that's got to be attached to the web, I need to go file with them, and then I'm hearing from the FDA that they're going to look at technology on a case-by-case basis. Are you kidding me? Case by case?
Afterwards, right.
That's right. That is right. And there are now 97,000 mHealth apps in the marketplace. 97,000. There's one. He's a walking app right there. And you would agree with that, wouldn't you, Kathy? The Dr. Collins app. We can do that. 97,000. 15% of those are used by healthcare professionals. What we are doing is saying, look, if it has a life or death consequence, a high risk, FDA, that should be something that goes to you. Other things, send it straight to the marketplace. If it's something that ends up in a gray area, go to ONC. But you don't want to have this process where innovators cannot have the certainty to get the VC and the backing, et cetera, that is needed to move something to the marketplace. So what we're trying to do is clear that up and say, FDA, this is your pot. Everybody else, You go straight to the marketplace. Have at it. Innovate. Bring things forward.
Thank you. That was a great answer. You have my vote.
Thank you. Yeah, George.
We met earlier. My name
Yes.
is George Hill from
Yes.
Vanderbilt, and you're my representative. I live in Horseshoe Bend and Bellevue. And I really thank you for coming and interacting with us
Sure.
and the support that you've been providing to NIH. You have an opportunity to challenge us. In other words, you walk the halls of Congress, and this is a budget-neutral time. So for those of us who are interested in seeing our research continue to be funded or other initiatives continue to be funded, but sticking with research and science, what would you say to us so that there would be an easier pathway to having some of those successes occur? I mean, when you're walking in Congress, you hear a lot and you interact with your colleagues. What are we missing? What are we not doing that might be more helpful?
I appreciate that. That is a great question, and one that, as you all summarize what you have learned and brought forward, I hope you'll put that on the table and talk about it, because yes, there does exist that disconnect between policy and innovation because they move at different paces. And see, what we're trying to do with 21st Century Cures is just create the environment in which innovation can take place, but not be restrictive in saying it's got to be here and it's got to be done this way. What we need to hear from you is this. We've got an idea. Like Dr. Lifton was saying, you're looking at a body of research over decades, and it leads you to say, you know, there might be something more here that if we do a little bit more research and dig a little deeper, we can find an answer for this. And that is where NIH and some of these grant monies can come into play. And one of the things we in Congress want to see is how this research has follow-on. And when we do oversight hearings, we want to see that there is an ability to follow on. It's difficult for us if we think there's going to be a grant made for research and it gets part of the way but not all the way there, and then it stops. Because then you say, what did that yield? Now, we also need to hear from you, and this is something NIH has been great talking with our team about, and researchers who live around us have talked to me about, the ability to share data and to know what is taking place in different places. Well, transfer rights, of course. We're going to have to deal with that. The privacy concerns as that is shared. All of that are questions we're going to have to answer. And we know there's a place for us in doing that, and we should, as Dr. O'Rourke said, with her question. And my answer back, we're going to put those on the table and address them because they're enablers to you to do your job. So what we need to know is where these roadblocks are. What's an impediment? What is a barrier to entry? And then how do we help you continue with that and be a wise steward of the dollars that are there for research work to get to these goals of eliminating disease, managing disease, addressing it, finding a cure, and a better quality of life. So, you know, I can't stand here and say, we've got all the answers. We do not. And we're looking for you as we've created what we think is going to be a very flexible model for research and innovation. We're looking to hear from you as to how we tweak that as we go forward. And then we will continue the oversight and the work with the NIH and the FDA in order to make certain that we kind of keep it between the tracks so that innovators and entrepreneurs aren't coming back to us and saying, hey, wait a minute. If they're overreaching somewhere, we need to know. We do that in oversight. Thank you, sir.
Well, Congressman Marsha Blackburn, you've been wonderful to come and spend time with us and really have inspired all of us by the way in which you're leading this effort along with your colleagues in 21st Century Cures. And I think you've all heard the door seems to be wide open for continued input to this process. And let's hope that, you know, in another few months we'll get this activated on the other House of Congress, which we heard about from Senator Alexander yesterday, and we might actually by end of this year, early next year, see something enacted.
That's the goal.
And that would be an enormous achievement, a signal moment, a really remarkable bipartisan effort to try to do something to advance the cause of medical research that we all care about. So thank you so much for being here and for that leadership.
Looking at this whole project, it's it's quite remarkable, and in my view, it's breaking ground in a lot of areas. Not that they hadn't been thought of before, but really will be the embodiment of sort of several revolutions happening simultaneously. Participant-led research, which is a remarkable change in the way research is done. The participant, not just as a recipient of our brilliant largesse as academics or government people. This big data EMR revolution that's occurring that we're going to take advantage of, and the molecular revolution that was Rick just referred to. But at the end of the day, for something that's called the Precision Medicine Initiative, you have to have data. And in today's day and time, it has to be data that is reproducible, and when analyzed by more than one person, coughs up something similar to the same result. And I think that's a real struggle to figure out how to take all this disparate stuff and end up with something that you can analyze that yields a meaningful result. And just personally for me in the last 5 years, as I've dealt a lot at the interface of big data and research, I'm seeing a lot of misfires where the amount of data far exceeds the amount of knowledge that's being derived from it. So I'm counting on this panel to come up with the insight. What we'd like to do, in the hour that we have, I wanted to give everybody a chance just to make a couple of comments first, and then we're going to go down the list of questions that we had. I've identified a lead responder for each of the questions, and then we'll leave ample time for discussion. Herman, maybe you can start. And I've asked people to think about. It's not a chance to show how smart we are. We're all smart. It's what kinds of things would be useful as the study is designed, insights that would be important.
Okay. Thank you for a pretty general question for me to respond to. I think there are, as you say, a lot of smart people here who know a lot about molecular and cellular level risk. And when we talk about precision medicine, I think a lot of people automatically jump to genomic level issues. But I want to be sure that as we talk about these things, to remember that we have to contextualize a lot. We have to know a lot more beyond the, quote, biology of the phenotypes that we examine and are concerned about. So I think it's important for us to look at and maybe learn from the wisdom of some of the existing cohort studies, those things that help us put biology in perspective, help us understand a little bit about how the phenotypic manifestations actually occur and vary and are influenced by things in the social, psychological realm, if you will. So it's important then for us to contextualize things like family environment, neighborhood environment, things that are not necessarily that you could draw from a medical record. I think there's a richness there, a nuance there that we do ourselves a disservice if we deprioritize or minimize its importance in the ultimate manifestation of disease. And I also think that if we stick, for instance, to what's in the medical record, we will miss important opportunities not only to see additional risk beyond what gets traditionally carried through in that documentation, but also miss those things that may be environmental that actually support resilience in the face of risk. There is in the disparities literature, and I don't mean to digress much, but here, in the disparities literature is often one group versus another group, and we forget about the in-group heterogeneity. And a lot of that heterogeneity may be determined by some of the things that cannot or are not traditionally captured by the medical record.
Right, so we'll add a few general comments before we get to the specific questions.
General comments. All right. So for those that don't know, so I'm Brad Mallon. I'm a professor of biomedical informatics and computer science at Vanderbilt University. I think there are several things that need to be taken into account by the committee as you're moving forward. First off, I want to make sure that we know what the area is that we're looking at. If it's precision medicine or is it precision health? If it's precision medicine, then the discussions that we've been hearing so far around how you reuse electronic medical records and the focus on medical records and analytics in the medical domain make a lot of sense. If it's going to be about health, then there's going to be many other fire hoses to drink from. And we need to be aware of the fact that that information is uncurated, it is not known to the extent to which it is viable for research purposes, and it's going to require a lot of investigation from individuals who are not necessarily the individuals that you would have at the table when doing medical research. There's a lot of data scientists out there who are just doing things that you're probably unaware of, and it could have a lot of use in your environment, but it may not. The second thing that I want to be clear about is that we also have to figure out the levels at which we make this information available to people and who we're making it available to. We are increasingly picking up more information and creating more zones with respect to where that information is going to be used. We are moving beyond the clinician scientist and again moving back towards the data scientist and towards citizen scientists who really believe that they have the ability to do investigations with this information. And if that's the case, then there will be things such as public use data sets that we're going to have to figure out what needs to be in those data sets. And so if we talk about core elements, we will be talking about core elements in each of these zones. And the final thing that I wanted to make known and just at least have the committee be aware of as they move forward is that there needs to be a decision up front about if you go centralization versus federation, because standards can help you know if the data is in the right form. Standards do not tell you semantics of the data. And if there's one thing that we've seen so far is that people use the same terms very differently at different places. And you cannot just combine the data and expect that the statistical significance is going to go up. In fact, it may actually go in the wrong direction. So just be aware of this as you start making incentives for how to spend this money.
Brad, I can't tell you how much I want to thank you for just saying that, because yesterday I almost jumped out of my seat when there were these discussions of data, moving back and forth gracefully between systems using standards, but it's like you're talking Chinese and English and you don't know which is which when it's very good for individual patient care, but not necessarily for research. So I appreciate that. Thomas.
Okay, so here's a full moon remark intended to be to stir the pot a bit. I'm an epidemiologist, Tom Glass from Johns Hopkins, and I've been struggling over the last day or so with the question of what kind of study is this that we're talking about. And people keep using the word cohort, but then when I press people on the standard questions I would ask about whether it's a cohort study, then people keep saying, well, I mean cohort, and they keep doing this. Or they say, what we're doing is a hybrid. And to use a potentially problematic metaphor, if you're with your partner and your partner says, honey, do you love me? And your answer is, well, I love you, or it's more like a hybrid, really. I think we can all see the problems that arise. So my best understanding is that you actually not only are you not planning a cohort study, but if the goal is to advance the PMI initiative, then actually trying to do a cohort study is probably the most inefficient and counterproductive thing you could possibly do. My first suggestion would be to not call it a cohort study. Now, what do you call it instead? Well, I came up with a data watering hole or a data combinatarium. We need some kind of new label. This will have a number of impacts, and it's one way to avoid the problems of the National Childhood Study, is to clear up the confusion about whether this is a cohort study, because that tension around that question was at the heart of some of the things that were very difficult about that study. It will also take the emphasis off of the 1 million number, because the sample size calculation problem is an essential feature of a cohort study. But if we're trying to do something else, then the importance of that number is reduced. So that'd be my first comment: is that we need to find a new name for it.
Okay, Rory, you have the great position of cleaning up the general comments and answering the first question. What categories of core data, in addition to basic demographics, should be collected on all participants? And what criteria should be used to define the core data set? But your general comments are welcome first, since you've been running a fairly well-known similar type of study over in the UK.
Yeah, well, my comments were going to be from the perspective of what I've learned over the last 10 years with UK Biobank, which I tend to call a resource. And that really, in coming to that, in thinking about UK Biobank, it's made me understand why this is a very different experiment from the kinds of observational studies or other studies that I've been involved in. I think many of us have been involved in, because actually what we are doing in UK Biobank, and I think that you're doing here, is building a resource for other people to use. And that's quite a different concept. If we think of Framingham, that was being built by people who were going to use it. They had specific hypotheses. They knew exactly what they wanted to do with it. Whereas with UK Biobank, I was pushed very hard in the final proposal to say, well, what would we do with it? And I refused. I said, if I put in, I'm going to look at these SNPs and disease, it'll look stupid in 5 years' time, because we won't be doing that. We will be doing something completely different, and that's what's turning out to be the case. So I think everyone thinks of it as a resource where you get a lot of information about the people who are in the resource and about the health outcomes that occur in those people. And that's, again, I think, where some of the challenges arise in general terms, because actually phenotyping the people is really quite straightforward in concept. One asks a lot of questions, one makes a lot of measurements, one links to other data, and in particular, with respect to this issue about core data, one embeds it in health delivery networks or in existing cohorts where you get information about the health in the past. And then, as I say, you get a lot of other measurements, questions, and samples. And then the difficult bit is the linking to their health in the future and phenotyping the health outcomes. Because if we're talking about precision medicine, it's not about being precise which patient you treat. We know that already. The question is their disease. So it's the precision of the phenotyping of the health outcomes that is the most important thing in this kind of study, and is the most difficult thing in this kind of study, because the participants are in front of you when you assess and do measurements, but not when they have their diseases. And so you have to get that through these either passive measures or by contacting them. But what you then get is a very crude measure of health. And it's that how do you at scale phenotype those health outcomes? And that's where it comes back to this issue about a resource being built for other people. What are the questions, the measurements, and the samples that all sorts of other people will want? how do you phenotype the health outcomes so that all kinds of other researchers in all sorts of other disciplines can get well phenotyped health outcomes to do their research? So it's building a resource that is accessible. And accessibility with regard to the core data, coming to that specific point. As I say, I think from the questions one would ask, you could start with the UK Biobank ones. There was lots of consultation about questions covering a whole range of areas. People could come up with better questions and things like that. One could get more questions through remote approaches to participants, I think, particularly using questionnaires that would give you more detailed information about exposures. There are also standard measurements. Again, one could look at any cohort or any other kind of study like this and look at the measures that you might do, the obvious measures, the less obvious measures around imaging, for example, and again around remote monitoring of environmental exposures, of blood pressure, of cardiac rhythm. And then you come to the samples. And the issue with the samples, I think, is twofold. One is samples are not really accessible if it's a resource. What you need to do is change the samples into data. Data are then accessible. Data are shareable. It democratizes the resource. It means it's available for the use by all kinds of researchers, rich or poor. Not just cardiovascular disease and cancer, but all the other kinds of diseases that don't have a lot of funding. Once it's data, it's free. We, in UK Biobank, give the data away. But the samples, we hoard. Not because we don't want them used, but because they are depletable. And that's the second issue with the samples. You can never get enough sample, with, of course, the exception of the DNA, which is not depletable, really. And so it's those other samples, it's the other biological samples that I think is really problematic. How can you get enough of it that there'll still be some of it left in 10 or 15 or 20 years to do the assays that you really want to do then? And then it comes to the question about what samples. So there's how much sample and how many different types of sample can you collect around not just genotyping, but around various omic assays in blood, but also, of course, the microbiome. So I think that although one can embed this resource within existing cohort studies or health record systems to get the previous health data, I think there will need to be additional information obtained on all of the participants or very large subsets around questions, measurements, and samples that can be used by everybody by turning all of that data, whether it's sample data, imaging data, questionnaires, measurements, into information. So around remote monitoring, when we do accelerometry, we get lots of traces. I don't know what to do with those traces. I want someone to analyze them in the way that you would assay a sample and turn it into information that then I, as an epidemiologist, can use. And the same thing with the health outcomes. That one wants to turn those into information about well-phenotyped health outcomes.
You guys have done a great job. We're about 3 minutes apiece on the general comments, which is right on target. So I want to redo this first question with just a very brief, like 15-second response from each. Do you think there should be a curated core data set as opposed to a large data resource from which people would then turn that into a curated data set? Should there be a core data set on the whole population in the study? Herman, you want to?
Well, again, I think there should be, at a minimum, some of the, again, key questions. Well, there's a lot of wisdom that has already gone into putting together essential questions that should be asked in some of the, pardon the term, cohort studies that are already out there and running. And I think we could benefit from surveying those questions that, again, my focus right now is on the contextual data surrounding the strictly biological. Looking at those questions and distilling out some of the key questions that get at some of the things that are most on our mind, such as, why certain groups have a greater risk in the context or are given a certain biological profile, and others show unique resilience, have paradoxically good health, given the same sort of genomic profile. So if we could surround that information with a set of core questions that begin, at least, to get us pointed in the right direction.
Right. Quick answers here so we can...
Quick answer. Okay, the quick answer. I'm gonna phrase everything for the committee as policy recommendations, and I'm gonna ask for policies. If you're going to have a large set of data, please have a quality control pipeline set up for the management of this data. Yes, there should be a core data set, but there should also be some curation to this, and it should be performed over time. Anybody who takes data out, you should be asking them to bring data back to you. What they do with it, it should be validatable, it should be replicable. That doesn't mean that they have to give you every piece of information that they have or everything that they've done, but anything that they're making claims about, if it's going to be useful for other people to do either validation or further discovery off of it, there should be a way to bring it back in and have provenance associated with it, and it should be QC'd.
Great. So, Thomas, as we go to you on the next question, which is how do we guard against cohort becoming all things to all people, let me just say, the depiction that I have, and I think you all have reinforced it, there's going to be this massive amount of data that will come from EMRs and accelerometers and wearable devices and everything. But within that, at least I believe there should be a common core data set, which is much more limited but highly curated, as you said, because to curate the entire mass of data as an enterprise won't work. But if you don't curate anything and leave it up to whoever gets it to curate it, you end up with a mess. So your description of a quality pipeline, a method of doing it, I think is a great way to say it. So Thomas, how do we keep this from being the Christmas tree with everybody's ornaments on it that no one wants to take off?
Well, first, my answer to should there be a core data set, my answer is yes. But it should be the smallest possible. And that we should have a very high ceiling to add things to it. Now, so the question I was asked, how do we guard against the cohort, becoming all things? I've started answering that already with my earlier comment about calling it a cohort. I think actually that will help. Let me give you 3 other quick thoughts and ideas about how to do that. The first is we can limit the choice of data elements by following this rather controversial rule, which is don't ask research participants or healthcare providers, don't bother asking them questions that they don't know the answer to. Simple enough idea, but what it means is don't ask people what their physical activity is, don't ask them what their diet is, don't ask them what their social networks are. If you want that information, put a sensor on them or get their cell phones. For a long time, we've sort of operated under the fiction that when we do self-reported physical activity or diet, then it turns out 60% of Americans follow physical activity guidelines. The accelerometers say it's 3%. So which ones do we want to believe? Don't ask questions that you're going to get that people don't know the answer to, and that goes for patients and participants as well as their healthcare providers. secondly, in terms of, we need criteria for figuring out what data elements belong that are going to be robust and will help to keep the scope relatively narrow. And two possible criteria for what should be included as a data element that will help keep things lean and mean would be the following. First, data perishability. Data elements should be included to the extent that if they're not collected at the time of enrollment or et cetera, that there's no way to reconstruct or recapture or link them. An example would be cord blood, for example, an obvious example. Another example would be, say, epigenetic profiles, methylation levels during critical period developmental windows. Examples of variables that need to be collected and included because not doing so will mean that they can no longer be captured. A second criteria, in my world of epidemiology, we're moving away from sort of identifying causal relationships in the abstract and shifting towards trying to figure out the impact of treatments. And one important implication of this from the causal inference world is that we ought to prioritize including data elements that can be imagined or can be, in practice, thought of as interventions, as treatments. Those two criteria will help to clarify and to emphasize the collection of variables that are likely to be most useful. My third idea is that, as you point out, Framingham and many of the successful cohorts had either a conceptual framework or a specific sort of scientific mission behind them. Obviously, having one research question guide this effort is not possible given what you're envisioning. However, what Mina said yesterday I think is exactly correct. We better think about some short-term deliverable goals that will demonstrate that this thing works and should be invested in. So to avoid this being all things to all people, what I would suggest is crowdsourcing and having a contest where people submit research questions, and it could be people, in the lay people. It could be scientists. It could be policymakers. It could be device makers. Submit a set of research questions. Identify the top 10 best research questions, the ones that can be answerable in the near and immediate term, and use that as a framework. Write those 10 research questions onto stone tablets and use them as a guidepost for figuring out what you're going to do first. If you could answer 10 research questions that have survived, the process of vetting and adjudication by really smart people, and that you make this an inclusive opportunity for people to participate broadly, then if you could identify that set of 10 primary sort of cardinal guiding research questions, that will be your best set of guidelines that will provide a guiding framework to prevent this from mushrooming into a study that tries to do everything and can do nothing. I'll stop there.
Those are great and interesting ideas. One of the seminal moments of my career was following behind Rory and colleagues. They had just done the ISIS trials. As I remember, the first trial had the front of one sheet of paper as the entire data collection instrument. So we came along with gusto, and we tripled it to 3 sheets of paper. But we had calculated that every data item in a 40,000 person trial was about $300,000 if you actually added up the cost of labor to collect the data. And so we said it's 3 pages and you cannot go beyond it. We sort of had a contest. You had to fight to keep any question on the forum. Rory, any insights now looking back on keeping things under control?
I think it was Richard Dole or Austin Bradford Hill that said you should ask yourself 10 questions about every question you put in a questionnaire. I wanted to come back to Brad's comment about data coming back in, because I mean that's a approach we've taken in UK Biobank, and it also links to this issue about core data and then enhanced data. Because the way we've come to see it is that we have a core data set, and then we've got this other stuff that people use and turn into what I kind of try to term information rather than data, because data is all this kind of stuff, whereas the information is the sort of analyzed stuff that is then accessible. And that might be turning samples into information by assays. And it may be taking imaging data or accelerometry data around activity and turning that into measures that people can use. And so we have got a core set of data, and then we've got this other stuff that people come along and particularly experts in particular areas come along and use, and then the requirement is that when they use it and turn it into accessible information, that information comes back in, as Brad has said, so that other people can use it. Now, in the main, at the moment at least, we are doing that for the resource with respect to assaying the samples, so genotyping all the samples, doing some standard assays of the samples. But with respect to other data, other people are doing it. So, for example, we did imaging of the eye in about 100,000 participants with optical coherence tomography and retinal photography. And there is now a growing consortium of eye doctors who asked us to put it in, so we did, and they are now the ones that are they're crowdsourcing some of the analysis, and they're kind of budding off into consortia with particular interest in particular areas of the eye, turning that stuff into information that they will use for research, and then it will go back into the resource so that people who don't know anything about the eye can use that information for their other kinds of analyses. And the same is happening with the accelerometry data. There are a consortium taking that, turning it into accessible information. So I think you have a core set, and then you've got this other stuff that is turned into accessible information by experts out there in doing their research, but they feed it back in and enhance the core data set with well-characterized, well-thought-through, validated information.
So a key sort of almost ethical principle is if you check out something from the store, you clean it up and you put it back in better shape than it was left, and it's accessible to everybody else who comes after. I think that's a great way to think about it.
Yeah, you become a funder of the resource. Yeah. Because you have invested in the resource. You might have done so by getting a grant, or you might be a company that comes along and does assays on the samples because it's useful for your research, and then those assay data go into the resource. You become a funder. You might be an informatics company that takes all this imaging data and works out how at scale to turn that into accessible information. And then that accessible information goes into resource. So the industry becomes a funder of the resource.
Great. Now I'd like to combine a couple of questions because we want to make sure we have time for Q&A at the end. And to me, they're sort of bookend questions that we were given. To Herman, what should be collected directly from the participants? And to Brad, what is it that the EMR cannot give us?
Okay. I think, again, if you have the participants' permission to get their medical record, it's sort of like, at least it appears to me, like flipping a switch and you get a certain body of information, and the participant no longer, and maybe these are details need to be worked out, no longer has a lot of control as to what details are either available or not that is within that medical record. But all of that needs, again, and I've said this before, to be set in a context, and it's there where you have the opportunity to really get something that's more in depth on each participant. So I would think that getting those, again, contextual data that help us understand better what is going on with each individual is important. So the types of things that we in the Jackson Heart Study and others get through questionnaires, through that might be about, again, family, neighborhood, other things, answers to questions about their individual level experiences. Are they experiencing stress? How does stress relate to all the other data that we have and eventuate in phenotypes that are of concern? Other psychosocial variables that can be obtained only through talking or accessing directly that participant. Other things, I guess, could be available through remote monitoring. Things like you can ask someone about sleep, and you'll get a pretty poor assessment of their sleep or a rough idea of the quality thereof. But remote sensors can tell you a lot of detail that would be very relevant to that person's health overall. So I think, again, you get a great and rich set of data out of a medical record, but talking directly to the participant about all of those things outside of the strictly biological, I think those things you have to go directly to the person for.
So, Brad, what are the limitations of the EMR, and what do we do to work around it?
All right, number one, I'm not a clinician. Okay, that said, I'll play one on TV. So, how many of you had salty foods this morning? Great. Did you tell your doctor? Will you tell your doctor? All right, so there's a lot of information. There's a lot of things that happen that is outside of the clinical domain, right? We don't get to observe them all. We don't get to see them. I'll give you an example. We have plenty of blood pressure readings that patients are sending back to Vanderbilt. They're sending back to us so that we can analyze it. We have no idea what they were doing beforehand. We don't know where they were. We don't know if they were standing. We don't know if they were sitting. We don't know if they ate salty foods in the morning. So we have absolutely no idea how reliable an individual's blood pressure reading is when we compare it to somebody else's. So again, I'm going to come back to context. Context becomes big. The more context you have, the more you can do with the data. That said, the more context you have, the more variables you have. And that makes it even harder to do any analysis on the data. So what do you have? What is not in the EMR? Basically, anything that does not happen in a clinical setting and the patient does not tell a doctor or tell a nurse or somebody who's doing documentation doesn't end up there. So probably about 95 to 99% of your activities don't end up in an EMR. I do want to bring up one other aspect, though, because I think it has a major implication for looking at precision or personalization. Particularly, we're talking about the patient as if the patient has the ability to tell us everything that's happened to them, whether it be their biology, whether it be their environmental exposure, whether it be if they slept last night. But that's not always the case. A lot of what happens to a patient and the extent to which they respond to treatment is also who they're interacting with in the clinical setting. So are they working with a nurse who has experience for 10 to 15 years, or are they working with somebody who's just out of school? Are they working with a care team that talks with each other on a daily basis? Are they working with a care team that was just brought together on an ad hoc basis and have never worked with each other before? Did this person were they given their medication at the right regimen, at the right rate? So if you're going to look at medicine, if you're going to look at the practice of medicine and you're going to try and refine it and make people's health care better, you really have to look at who's actually treating the patient. This really opens up the system when you think about it, because we're talking about the patient as the ego, but in reality you want to say, how are they ingressed into the system? How were they pushed along through the system? What happened when they left the hospital? Who called them to check and see if they were okay, to remind them if they had to take their medication, and then bring them back in through some type of a schedule? Did they miss that meeting? Why did they miss that meeting? This is the type of information that if you're going to try and specialize healthcare, you want to have this information, but you don't necessarily have the ability to collect it. So if you ask a patient, can we have this information? Well, does that mean they have to go to their doctor and ask their permission to report that information to you? I would love to see that information. I see it at Vanderbilt. I don't see it at any other healthcare system, but I think that's what would be useful.
Great. So we got 8 minutes left, and you're going to get another shot at bite at the apple here when we get to probabilistic de-identification and what it actually means and how it might be useful. But Thomas, I wonder if you can take the lead in this non-cohort data combinatorium that we're about to engage in. Should there be some sort of standardized follow-up, or should we just collect the passive follow-up from EMRs and other sources?
Ooh.
2 minutes.
I think, the question of follow-up is an extremely challenging one, and I think what we have to do is balance the critical need to follow up with completeness versus following up with the frequency and intensity we would like. And so when you follow up and you lose 2/3 of your people, and you lose underrepresented populations, and you lose sick people, then you induce selection bias problems that are extremely damaging to the inferences that you care about. So one of the common mistakes people make in studies is that they have an overly ambitious follow-up strategy with inadequate attention to the resources needed to actually track and maintain a high level of continued participant engagement. So I guess if there was a kind of goal, it would be to do follow-up, but to actually do it in a way that, as much as possible, minimizes the need for actual direct contact with people you're following, so that you lower the price of or the cost of continued engagement in the study, and bend over backwards to minimize emigrative loss to follow-up, because that is scientifically incredibly damaging. So that's my answer.
Does anyone else have anything profound to say about that? I mean, I think I basically personally agree completely with what you said, and I think people who haven't done a lot of research often completely underestimate what happens when there's a differential loss to follow-up, or informative censoring, as it's called. Rory?
I mean, I agree. I think that as the baseline, one needs to have a comprehensive passive follow-up system using health outcome data. I think someone made the comment yesterday that in terms of health outcome data, we're not trying to get a download of all the health outcome information. One wants to have a set of data in the same way that one would have a set of core baseline data. It might be the coded data that comes at regular intervals from healthcare record systems. Probably be coded in different ways in different places, but you don't want just a big download. The issue, though, is that will get the health outcomes that someone pointed out again yesterday that you can get from health record systems, but not the health outcomes that you can't get from those systems. So I think it's an experiment, but whether there are ways now of getting information from participants that they don't know themselves, in a way, by which I mean, take the example of cognition. One of the things we're looking at is whether we can follow up participants, albeit understanding there are problems of follow-up, through remote systems to find out about health outcomes like cognitive decline. You can make obvious comments about how people who decline enough may not then be followed up through internet systems. But it may still be that in the earlier phases where there's change, that bias is not substantial. So you could use accelerometer, various monitors of people's activity to determine whether there are changes related to cognition. Do they stop leaving their home? Has been one of the suggestions that's been made. Might be a measure of changes. So I think that the health record systems are critical. That they give you stage one of what people probably have in terms of disease health outcomes, and that you might then go to a second stage, going to more detailed record systems for particular conditions, for particular information, to get to a better phenotyped health outcome. But that you might also look at some of these remote systems and remote monitoring to assess health outcomes.
Great. So we got 3 or 4 minutes left, Brad, for you to talk about the identification. I do want to put in one plug for the ultimate outcome, death. And it's probably not an issue in the UK, but in the US, the Achilles heel of a large part of the published literature from EMR-based research is that you don't know if the person's dead or not because it's not recorded in most electronic health records as a data item, and people just aren't back at clinic, but you don't know why. And in my area of heart attack, if you want to see a biased analysis, look at non-fatal myocardial infarction as an outcome. It's a very strange thing. People who survived an event where half of people died. So we've got to, in the U.S., because it's so hard to actually get the death outcomes right now, figure out a way to make sure that's there. At least the terribly biased studies. So, Brad, what about de-identification?
Okay, I'm not going to hijack this panel with a long discussion on this because it's a hot button. What I'm going to say is that the notion of de-identification is that this concept is not meant to be demonized. There are lots of arguments which say that, or publications that show you can re-identify someone given their DNA, given clinical information, given demographic information. Great. I'm going to ask you guys one more question. How many of you have ever re-identified somebody in your data sets that you've studied? Right. So why not? So there's a lot of incentives and disincentives. There are incentives for making investigators and resources look stupid by people who want to do so. There are also incentives for maintaining the resource and being a good Samaritan within the community that you work in. A lot of this is really just a risk management problem in that you want to set up the right incentive structures, you want to set up the right credentialing structures for managing the data and ensuring that it's used in a way that you want it to be. And you also want to have appropriate penalization structures on the back end to disincentivize somebody from actually manipulating the system and committing some type of malfeasance. You want to use the best type of protections. I'm not going to go through what these protections are. They could be encryption, they could be audit, they could be some type of removal of explicit identifiers. Whatever they are, really all they're doing is they're serving as disincentives for misuse and malfeasance. So all I'm going to recommend is that at the end of the day, do not look at this as a black and white, either the data is identified or identifiable or it's not identifiable. It's really somewhere in the middle, and that you can measure how much of a chance there is that the information will be exposed given the different levels at which you give people access to it and who you give access to it. But just define what those zones are going to be and do some type of a risk analysis before you actually send the data out into that domain. And at the end of the day, make sure that you have policies, whether they are federally mandated or whether they are contractually negotiated, such that if somebody does something in the system, you have the ability to hold them accountable. I do worry that if we do not use accountability structures, that it leaves the system such that you take the data, you throw it off of a cliff, and you hope that it hits the ground. You can't guarantee that, right? You do need to know that there's some type of a control structure at the end of the day.
I want to thank you guys. It is, by the way, Kathy, another all-male panel. I didn't select it. But I do want to thank you. I mean, this was meaty material. I wish we had 4 hours to discuss it, but we do want to open it up for the group. I think you've each contributed something that the committee would be wise to listen to as it designs. Mike?
So just, I hope we're permitted to use the word cohort in its lay sense of the word. We chose not to call MVP a cohort study because it's not a study, it's a program or a platform. But cohort simply means, in its lay terms, a collection of individuals. And it's such a useful term, I'd hate to abandon it. But in terms of the data, that we've organized our data in 3 domains, and then we apply the 4 C's to each domain. And the domains are biospecimens, data we collect only from the participant, and data we get somewhere else. And the 4 C's are collect, clean, collect, catalog, clean, and curate. And there's a cost benefit in each of those in each of those areas. And so what we've spent a year and a half figuring out what we would collect from the participants, and we tried to balance what's in the record and what's not. And then our cleaning of that is simply making sure what's on the data set, on the questionnaire, makes it into the data set. Then when there's derived variables from a subscale or whatever, that happens later when an investigator really wants to invest some resources in it. The grand sea of data that we could get on individuals passively from many sources, whether it be the electronic health record, National Death Index, CMS, DOD, the exposome, particulate matter. What we're simply doing is categorizing the potential in certain areas, and then for things that we think will highly be used, we're starting to clean at a tier 1 level, meaning rudimentary cleaning. And then extensive curation, we're waiting till there's an investigator that really wants to use it for 2 reasons. One is that it's labor intensive, and the second is that if I was to curate it to my liking, it might not satisfy the needs of the next investigator. So I mean, I think that it's useful to develop some sort of strategy, and then begin taking those catalogs of what's available and what's potential. Even the biospecimen, there's that same philosophy. You collect the specimen, you catalog what you have, we clean it by doing some processing like DNA extraction, and then curation comes on a cost-benefit basis, whether we're curating for genomic or...
You could write the textbook of data janitorship. I'm convinced of it, and I would like to actually help get that done, because I think it's critical. I think for many people in the group who haven't done this, can you give them an idea of how much of it is push a button magically and having some informatics scheme do it versus manual human labor?
Well, I think that there's a book that needs to be written about that, and I think all together in this room we're going to be helping to write that book. And I think that we do need to we need to industrialize this process. And, those of us from ISIS, Gusto, we've been doing that on a smaller scale with data that we collect through questionnaires. I really think that we're inventing this field in trying to figure out how to do that on a grand scale with the passively collected data sets that we're working with. And that a lot of effort has to be invested in first manually understanding the process and creating some validation algorithms, but then trying to I think it's been said over and over again, engage mathematicians and informaticists, people from the financial field, from various sectors who have done this in other fields to help us bring this field along.
I see all the data janitors in the room are at the mic, so this is great. Rory, you had a comment. I know this is going to be hard, and Kathy and Gwen, just to be sure, I'm getting the time's up sign, but we go to 10, right? Then we're going to turn over the floor. So
just one quick D to add to Mike's 4 C's, and the one that led our thinking was defer. Only do the things you had to do now, and defer. And that relates particularly to some of the ways in which one deals with the data. So don't assay the samples.
It's kind of like our family. We don't really clean up the house till somebody's coming to visit.
Yeah, it's cheaper that way because you only have to do it once. But it'll become cheaper to do the assays. You can do more assays. You can do them at higher quality if you do them all in one go. And the same thing with things like monitors. Wait until you've got it all, and then do it at the last minute.
I think you can hear me. Once again, I want to thank the panelists because I think you guys this has been a terrific conversation, and as you said, Rob, I think it could go for hours. So we'll only make it go for minutes. But as I reflect on Dr. Collins' question yesterday, or challenge yesterday, which had to do with this resilience cohort, the group of people who should be, by all accounts, susceptible to a disease and in fact don't experience it or its sequelae. And then I think about what we've been talking about today, which is the breadth of data that we need and the depth of the data. I'm really struck. I'm really challenged because obviously our most healthy patients will by definition have the least amount of data easily accessible by any of the methods we would want. So those patients who we aspire to model, at least for resilience, we won't have the data without some of the things that you all have discussed. I sort of picture the old movie The Truman Show as saying that we almost need to come up with some method by which we can see everything they've done, have it as raw signal, and be able to process it. Short of something quite that draconian, do you all have any other strategies that you would recommend to us to capture the kind of data we would need to sort of promote the idea of resilience analysis?
So we all know that it's a good idea to measure DNA because DNA sets the etiologic inertia throughout the life course. If you want to understand resiliency and risk, the two sides of that, and I'm basically reiterating something that Herman said without his gorgeous sonorous baritone, is we need to add to that an appreciation of the importance of ZNA. ZNA is zip code at birth. And if there are very few high penetrance genes that have the explanatory power to predict resiliency and risk as much as where you were born. The programming that occurs in early life, if DNA is the assembly instructions biologically, ZNA is the assembly instructions for behavior, for psychology, for all of the psychosocial stuff that matters a great deal, including resiliency. So I would make an argument for adding ZNA as a critical data element, in part, both because I think it is a powerful way of understanding the lifetime risk profile of an individual, but as a way of establishing the basis for understanding a lifetime of resilience.
4 people. My only 2 words about this is 3 words. Dynamic geospatial referencing, I think, is where we need to go, but that's for another time. Let's go over here.
So I've just got 3 comments, and I'll kind of work backwards. So you can get to death by using the National Death Index. You're 2 years behind, but it's very linkable, very doable. You get your cause of death. It's never perfect because death certificates are never perfect, but it's highly predictive and it works. Second one is, when we've talked about retention and response, those are kind of 2 different issues. Retention of your cohort means that you know where your people are and that you're following them and that you have some semblance of being able to collect their outcomes. Response, if you're repeatedly trying to access new data, response rates, and both of those can affect the internal validity. If this is going to be a true cohort, following them forward in time, having good response rates is going to benefit just the quality of your updating of your exposure information, as well as updating your outcomes, bar them not being death, and you can't link to a registry. And then I just want to address your point, Tom, about collecting information on diet and physical activity. I disagree with you. I do think that we have learned a lot by collecting that, and some of that's because you can, with large numbers, you can go a mile wide and an inch deep. And in fact, in repeated studies over the last year or 2, our group, as well as multiple other groups, have shown repeatedly that following both the American Cancer Society guidelines for cancer prevention, as well as the WCRF AICR guidelines for prevention, for physical activity and nutrition and weight maintenance, have consistently and consistently shown that it reduces overall mortality, cardiovascular disease mortality, and cancer mortality in each of the domains separately, as well as following the collective guidelines. And so again, the mile wide and inch deep can get you some pretty good information that can be of good for the benefit for populations.
Yeah, all right, so we're down. Gwen, can we take 2 minutes for each of the three people? Okay, great. One quick comment on India. I related to Representative Blackburn. I have great hopes that 21st Century Cures will fix some of the problems we currently have with the National Death Index and other means. It can't.
So it's a jurisdictional issue, so we're working with the Committee of Jurisdiction to fix it.
Sorely needed. I think we all agree. All right, Esteban.
Dr. Glass, your comments were refreshing because they're very pragmatic and practical. So I would like to know what your suggestions are for making sure that we include diversity. Since you're an epidemiologist, you're at Hopkins, you know how important this is. Can you suggest to the group here what you suggest? And keep in mind that in 1993 we had that congressional mandate, and we've done terribly, right? So 4.5%. And
all right,
that's
Tom,
not not the NIH's fault. It's our fault as reviewers. So.
I mean, if once you give up the idea of doing a cohort study where you have to have a defined sampling frame and a rigorous sampling strategy, then you can use opportunistic ways of identifying harder to reach populations by going to where they are more likely to be found. I think that a strategy of over-screening is better than oversampling, recognizing that we need larger numbers of potential participants, given that we know that many of the populations we care about, including, are going to have a lower participation rate. And I think also trying very hard to collect data on people who say no to being part of the study so that we can address and adjust for sample selection bias problems. On the immigrative selection bias issue is something that's extremely worth doing. So with just 1 minute, I'd love to give a longer answer, but that's my first set of thoughts.
Okay, thanks. Now turn to my statistical mentor, Frank Harrell.
Frank Harrell, head of biostatistics at Vanderbilt. To paraphrase something Dr. Glass said earlier, you can't really make progress until you get specific and you start mentioning specific clinical questions that you want to answer. And I would also encourage the group to think about specific classes of research that this sort of resource would be able to address, which may help guide the construction of the resource. But these are classes such as diagnosis, prognosis, resource utilization, access to care, association studies, and characterizing populations, with therapeutic effectiveness being pretty far down the list of what this resource is probably able to do. In terms of characterizing populations, I think we would do well to coordinate that with some of the other government agencies, such as National Center for Health Statistics, because they have resources such as NHANES, which has been extremely valuable. And it would be sort of a shame not to link up with some of these other resources.
So I'll be quick. If you look at countries in, say, Scandinavia that have socialized medicine, I mean, collection of data of this kind is inbuilt and it's natural, and it's like it's like the IRS. I mean, there's like no stone unturned. I mean, you can drop out of it; it's all there. So I'm wondering, with the Obamacare, no one has sort of mentioned that effort which is here. Is it possible to build into Obamacare some sort of a data collection of the kind that we are after, so we collectively sort of collect systematically data all over the state in a representative way?
I'm glad you didn't ask that question at 8:15, but
still being webcast, though, right?
Yes, in my prior academic life, we always had fellows from Scandinavia for just the reason that you gave, is amazing data collection. I just think in the U.S. it's going to be very hard to link up directly, although as data resources are made available, we'll link up with them. Rory?
Something like that actually happened with our biobank, not in the UK, but in China. We recruited 500,000 people in 10 regions in China, linking it into the cancer registries and death registries. Then the healthcare system collapsed, and then they put in place health insurance schemes, which were so popular that they had very high coverage. And we've then been able to link those 500,000 people into those health records systems, which were all computerized, built from scratch, new. And because they were about money, which I think was the point that was being made, they're very accurate because it's all about billing. So all the billing that occurs tells you exactly what has happened in the hospital and the health outcomes. So I think it's not a daft suggestion to kind of think whether some of the billing, I don't know the system here, but some of the billing elements might be relevant to finding out what happens to people in the way it did with China. It was completely unplanned and unexpected, but it has enriched that resource in China enormously.
Yeah, I think it bears mentioning that Obamacare has been somewhat spotty in what we call the red states in terms of its uptake and how it will impact the health of the poor in particular in those states. And any system that was on the back of Obamacare would, excuse me, almost automatically miss a substantial number of the people who are most vulnerable and where we might find the most important information about precision health. Now.
So one comment, and so you might have heard the question I asked earlier this morning. I think that the suggestion is wonderful. I think that America is a very sectoralized society that has also a split between for-profit and not-for-profit environments. One of the reasons why what you're suggesting is so challenging here is that you do have a situation where places that are outside the healthcare domain are regulated by different authorities than the healthcare sectors or the healthcare sector itself. And so even in healthcare, while we're trying to push for something like a blue button, where you can get your EMR information at the click of a button, we don't have a green button so that you can walk into your grocer and ask for all of your purchasing history over the last couple of years. You can't do the same thing with anybody unless they're an online provider like Amazon, and you might be able to get your purchase history. So the fact that there are zones, there are boundaries that are not necessarily physically enforced but artificially enforced, it makes it extremely challenging to do so. And so if we're going to focus with respect to the PMI, I think we have to know what those boundaries are going to be and where you want to fight your battles.
Great. Well, I'm not going to attempt to summarize, but this is a great panel, and I think you all gave insights that the committee needs to think about carefully as the study is designed. And for those of you not on the committee, I'm sure we'll be back talking with you about the study design. So thanks. And also thanks for staying on time. Quite remarkable given the depth of discussion.
Good morning. I'm Shariki Kumanyika, one of the ad hoc working group members, and I have the pleasure of moderating this panel on possibilities from direct from participant data. And this prior panel, which was really excellent, is a perfect setup for this because we've now heard a lot about what data people think would be collected from participants. I just noted down the possible scope, stress, perceptions of environments, sleep, description perhaps of the healthcare experience, cognition, environmental exposures or perceptions of those, and behaviors, of course, all the behaviors that we are interested in. So there are the possibilities for both the active collection through not from the long 4-hour interview sitting in front of a person, but through electronic means, and then the passive data collection, like the wristbands that people wear for tracking their physical activity. And we have 4 panelists who are going to give us their perspectives on issues related to direct from participant data. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves and talk just briefly about who you are, what you do, and what your perspective is on this issue, and then we'll go through 4 questions, but leave time for discussion at the end. So we'll just go in order. We'll start with you, Kathy.
Okay. Hello, I'm Kathy Giusti. I'm the founder and chairman of the Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation. I wanted to be here today primarily because I view this entire project to be fascinating from a personal perspective, but then also from a perspective of how we work with the participants within oncology. From the personal side, myeloma is still considered a fatal disease. I do have multiple myeloma. I've had it for a number of years. I'm probably what's considered an outlier since I've lived 20 years with it. But interestingly to me, my identical twin sister has stage 3 breast cancer. And it always makes me wonder, in a world where you have identical twins, why is one getting myeloma and one getting breast? My father died of kidney cancer, my mother has melanoma, my grandfather had myeloma, my grandmother had breast. And yet I can't really seem to get anybody that wants to study that family, and I find that interesting in itself, too. And I worry for my children, and I think that's why I'm fascinated by all of this and how we actually want to put all the information together. I think from a foundation perspective, every patient group is different, and how we study and work with our patients is completely different. At the MMRF, we are intensely vertical. We collect high amounts of vertical information, genotypic, phenotypic, everything. It doesn't mean that we don't have half of the patients in our database, and we also go just an inch deep, but we really love going super deep and making sure all of that data is shared. So I think it's important that we know within patient groups, we all look different, but we all have amazing amounts of trust with our patients. So there are some things that we may be able to do quickly within the project.
Good morning. I'm Adam Amder. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the American Sleep Apnea Association. The disease I sort of represent in this world sort of parallels the healthcare system, in that fragmented sleep is sort of like the healthcare system, in that it's been very siloed. Not only are we sleep patients, but we also represent a lot of the comorbidities in heart disease, diabetes, mental health, cancer, and so forth. I am the son, husband, father, brother, and child of sleep apnea, in that my father had quadruple bypass at 38, early onset Alzheimer's at 50. We know now by just anatomical features that he most likely had an undiagnosed sleep disorder for most of his life. So we're big advocates into the research, but we're also looking to bring sleep into the preventative arena, and that exercise and nutrition are both major parts of the world, and everyone's gotten up to speed on it, but we feel like sleep is the third missing ingredient. It's something that we do 1/3 of our lives. Sleep is something that is sort of been used as a badge of honor in the healthcare and medical system to see how you best perform under sleep deprivation, and we know from a performance and an education standpoint, more mistakes are made as a result of that than positive. For the last 1.5 years, I've had the pleasure of being one of the first patient-powered research networks in PCORI as the Sleep Apnea Patient-Centered Outcome Network. And we've had great success in that we've learned more as community citizen scientists as far as what research is all about. And as a result, we've learned what to do and what not to do, and we're very much looking forward to what the end-all, be-all outcomes of the PMI will be. And I will leave you with these thoughts, and that, at the end of the day, patients want answers to our questions. We want to know how we can improve our quality of life immediately, not 10 years down the road. And that's it.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Christopher Burrow. I'm the EVP Medical Affairs at a company called Umetrics, and I'm delighted to be here. Thank you, Dr. Collins, for inviting me. I see a lot of faces in the crowd that I know. I want to answer the key question, Chris Burrow, why are you here? And what I want to bring to all of you is what I know about the Blue Button Initiative, which has been referenced once today, I'm happy to say. I have a blue button on my lapel. This initiative, launched by President Obama in 2010, is based on giving every American the right to acquire their coded personal medical data from both EHR systems and from insurers. And what I think most people in this room do not know, but I live every day, is there are now applications out there, my company built one called iBlueButton, that allows patients to actually pull in their coded data. How extensive can this be? This means that 38 million Americans who are on fee-for-service Medicare can get their fully coded medical data on their app today and contributed to such an initiative. This is an extraordinary resource. This goes well beyond giving permission to an EHR system to provide your data passively to a research initiative. No, citizens can actually get their own data with their own apps and contribute it if the consent problem is handled, if the data use agreements are done correctly. This can be enormously important. We need to rethink. A lot of these apps are mobile. They're on the smartphone of our co-citizens, 200 million strong that now have smartphones. So we need to think about how to incorporate this data. And to come up with some comments just briefly that were made this morning, this session this morning was extraordinary. Rory Collins pointed out the need to go back and get additional data as we go forward. We can never be smart enough to know all the data we need up front. A smartphone establishes a link to a patient that can be used to generate longitudinal data and precise phenotyping of health outcomes over time. So I hope I've answered the question why I'm here. I look forward to the discussion.
So I'd also like to thank the director and the working group for the chance to be here. I work at an organization called Sage Bionetworks, where my job is to work on the governance issues, including informed consent, data sharing, and all the policies around it. We got our start at Sage really working with communities of data analysts under the idea that having one or two people in a lab analyzing data is a fundamentally broken approach. What we need are systems that let communities analyze data the same way that communities build software. And so we've spent quite a while working on technology that facilitates that, and it works well enough that we host the Cancer Genome Atlas, we host the Accelerating Medicines Partnership for Alzheimer's Disease, the Common Mind Consortium, and any number of other groups, because it turns out when you can collaborate on analyzing data with people that you don't work with, everyone discovers more things faster. But it became pretty clear that we needed to find engines for those communities to work on, and those engines are data that come from people that they're allowed to work on. And the existing systems of governance that sort of sit around clinical data for the most part make it really hard to integrate that into those communities. So earlier this year we launched 2 studies in partnership with Apple as part of the ResearchKit launch. One is in Parkinson's, one is in post-chemo cognitive recovery in breast cancer. We also had built enough of the technical infrastructure, and our consent work was far enough along that all 5 of the studies that launched actually used both our back-end and our consent work. We've enrolled 70,000 people or so since March 9 in those 5 studies, with very little advertising since the initial launch event. And I can talk about the consent piece of this, but actually what's more interesting to me is first we can apply process methods for engagement. These are sort of the classic ways that I've been hearing talk about. We can also apply behavioral economics methods for engagement, various kinds of reward systems and games that get people to participate in these things. And we can apply some of the things that are very well known in the software world, but not very well known in the health world, like user interface design. And all of these together collectively form a way to do engagement. None of them alone work very well. So applying user interface to consent turns out to be a really good way to increase informedness in the consent process, whether on a phone or in person. But until you can actually have the people that are in the studies give you comments about the studies and change your protocols in real time to reflect those comments, you're not engaging the participants in the study. We're averaging 3 to 10 comments per person in the studies. We have just refiled protocols on both of the studies that we're in control of to reflect those comments, to add things like news feeds, track new symptoms, use new sensors in new ways. And we make a promise to give back all the data to the participants and to share all the insights with the participants. And so these are all different pieces of how you engage, is to not treat people like a resource from which you extract data and move forward, no matter how you consent them. But as the consent is the beginning of a way to engage people in a study that they actually have a say in. And when you look at the data from the various studies, when you look at the sensor data or the survey data, and you look at the way that people are participating, the fact that they can actually request changes to the clinical protocol, the fact that they can give comments and that they see those comments being reflected in the study within 90 days of the study launching, that's how you start to get engagement. Governance and engagement are sort of matched at the hip. And consent is a piece, results return is a piece, data return is a piece, protocol adjustments are a piece. All of these things together form engagement. Because at a certain point, excitement, gamification, consent, peer interactions, all these things fade away in the face of daily life. And that's a fact of mobile life, that's a fact of digital life. Health is just a part of it. So we need to have some cohesive, holistic approach to this that we can apply if we're going to actually get people to do this over a long period of time. I'll stop there. Thanks again.
Right. So thank you all for your comments. This is really an exciting topic, and you've touched already on the areas that we want to address with the questions. So I want to start by asking each of you to comment on the how. What experiences do you have that can help us understand the best ways to get good, rich information from people, and not overburden them in the process? So just go down the row here.
So first of all, I would say that for many patients, you have to understand that they do want to learn along the way, and you also have to understand some are going to be more likely to do things than others. I think the more fatal your disease is and the more challenging your disease is, the more you're going to understand the need to be helpful. I think also the more uncommon and rare your disease is, the more you understand why data sharing becomes so critical. If you have an uncommon disease, there aren't enough patients at any one center that you can generate a database to actually understand what's going on in that disease. So I think one of the challenges that we have, even with a project like this right now, is that we're still trying to consumerize this. If we had patients sitting in this room for the last 2 days, their heads would be spinning because they actually don't understand the most simple piece of this, which is if you don't aggregate the data, if we don't aggregate everybody's data, then there's nothing to look at. There's nothing to generate the information that's needed to understand the biology and what's going on in all of these diseases. They don't understand that we don't have aggregation of data going on right now. And the other piece is they need to understand if you aggregate the data, we will start to learn more and more about you. So the more you learn about you, the more eventually you can go back and look at that data set and understand what you should be doing with your own disease, your very, very specific disease. So what we ended up doing, and we don't want to talk about our own issues, but the ones we're the closest to, so let's just talk about them, but you can apply them to any cancer, for example. We went back in and we said, okay, we know myeloma has at least 10 subtypes. We're going to sequence 1,000 genomes of patients from the moment they're diagnosed, first tissue sample. We're going to follow them longitudinally for at least 8 years. Every time they relapse, we're going to sequence them again, collect the data, put it in the public domain, allow everybody to share it, very deep data. Able to find new targets like BRAF and myeloma, able to then work with drug companies to do new trials in that area. So myeloma now working with melanoma, which is a whole interesting way of how you want data sets to get together. Now what we had to do is go to all of our patients and say, we want you to start giving us more information in the simplest of terms. Put them onto a gateway, started asking them the simplest of things like, are you in remission? They can't figure out if they're in remission or complete remission. So once you start giving them the questions, you realize they don't understand. Do you know your M-spike, the one number you really track in myeloma? 50% come back and go, what's an M spike? So you got to go back and fix that part of it. Eventually, you'll get to the 10% of patients that can answer every one of those questions and then say, I actually know my genomics, and I'm translocation 414, or I'm BRAF. At that point, we have now put all of our patients into a pool. And we put you into the pool that says you are BRAF positive, you are 414. The point of that is that we want to have researchers talking to them, understanding what's going on in their subtype, and we post clinical trials for that subtype immediately on the gateway. Why? Because that's how you put acceleration into the system, where not only are you using a huge data bank to identify a target, now you're building clinical trials to understand the right drug for that target, but you're also taking the, thousands and thousands of patients we have and getting them to raise their hand to say, I'm interested in that trial, and creating the acceleration. But I will tell you, it's a lot of work to get patients involved. The first step is just telling them where they fit into their big community, sending them visuals of myeloma looks like this and this is where you are, but then always encouraging them to answer the next question once you've got them engaged. So it is a process, but we haven't even informed them of the biggest issue, which is, why do you want us to have your data? Why is that important? They don't know there's a problem.
The proverbial text acronym that you see a lot every day is WIFM, what's in it for me? There's a lot of patients that are going to do this for altruism. There's a lot of patients that are working 3 jobs and can really care less about research, but know that their life, their outcome, their world is going to affect their child's life, or that of their families, or that of the workforce. I have a pulmonologist who used to say, without inspiration, you're going to wind up with expiration. So, which in the breathing world, that makes a lot of sense if you think about it. So there's recruiting, which is what the social networking, Twitter, Facebook, what have you. There's retention. If you're going to give, you got to get back. So it just can't be a one-way directional conversation. It's got to be bi-directional. And then there's sustainability. And the crowd. I'm happy that the crowdsourcing conversation came up earlier, and that not only should we be crowdsourcing for what the research questions should be, but ultimately we're going to crowdsource to how to fund this research. Patients are not going to wait for the traditional world to fund what they want to do. I'm sure you all are familiar with the Movember campaign, the campaign that was a crowdsourcing campaign where everyone grew facial hair in the month of November. It's been up and running for about 5 years. These guys have last year raised $150 million and funded 80 studies directly from the public. And you all are going to have to start coming to them, besides the traditional resources, to start looking for funding. And that's a game changer. And that's what this direct data is going to allow us to do. If the patients own the data, if the patients have control and access to it, they're going to determine who gets to use it in the end run.
So I'll pick up on what's in it for me. We live in a country where we have a tremendous problem in medical care with patient safety. Maybe 100,000, maybe 400,000 avoidable, preventable deaths per year in our healthcare system. As a federal government, we can engage our citizenry by giving them knowledge that they can access medical records from the VA, from military health through TRICARE, and from Medicare. This will help them take care of their families. You can know your mother or father's medical problems by accessing their Medicare data. So we have resources in our country where we can engage our citizens, both to give them safer, better health care by access to their information, which is key, but also by putting them in a position to contribute that data to a national research effort like the Precision Medicine Initiative. So we need to leverage the work we've already done together, extraordinary work. Think of what was just said about China. A whole study was going to fall apart, and then they used claims data to put it back together. We have the claims data. It's there sitting in the Medicare Blue Button record. Let's figure out how to tell Americans they can get this data with the app of their own choosing, something Medicare isn't doing right now. Let's do that so that we can make our citizens capable of contributing that data. Again, they can have the data on their own device.
So I'm going to start by channeling Amanda Palmer from a very different conversation, which is, in music, how do we make people pay for music was the big question. She's like, how do we let people pay for music? And in many ways, I think that's the number one thing we can do in clinical study is it's not how do we make people enroll in clinical studies, it's how do we let them, right? And the number one thing to do is ask them. It's remarkable how few people are ever asked to join a clinical study directly, right, by their government. And so I don't want to lose track of how important it is to ask people to enroll, because I think that's one of the easiest things that we're not doing. Then there's sort of a cluster of things that I think we've learned from the SAGE experience, at least preliminarily, which is you need to make people proud to be in a study. They need to feel like they're really helping, right? They're not in it because they're cynical. They're in it because they're hopeful, and we have to make them proud that they're in it. And that means part of that is making it easy to enroll, making it easy to participate, syncing with the motivations. I continue to think that a federal income tax credit would be motivating to this, that the right to buy insurance that might otherwise be discriminatory be available to people who enroll in this as a right of enrolling in the study. There are various incentives that are available to us to get people to do this. So that's sort of one cluster. A secondary cluster is, we need to make it easy and make people proud and give them incentives. But I think the biggest thing that we keep not talking about is that as long as only one group gets to analyze the data, it's going to be really hard to promise that the data is going to be used. And the biggest thing that I've learned along the last 5 years of this journey is that the thing that pisses off the patients the most is the idea that their data isn't making something meaningful happen. And so showing a path to data use that's transparent and comprehensible at the beginning is vital. And then at a regular interval, returning results. Right? Even if those results are, we don't really understand the results yet. But the minute my bias is that when we get a large enough cohort with enough coherent information about them, that a significant number of first-order insights are going to begin to drop out. Right? We heard yesterday we can pre-diagnose diabetes inside using the glucose meters. Right? I'm pretty sure that 23andMe's deals with pharma are coming because some of those first-order insights are coming out. Right? This cohort has the ability to say, here's the roadmap to getting the insights, here's the path to the analysts who are going to analyze the data, here's the transparent governance of how your data is going to be analyzed, and here are the regular moments at which we're going to tell you what we know, including when we don't know things. Right? And that's actually, I think, going to be the biggest way to keep someone who is already interested in enrolling because they're sick or because a family member is sick, and keeping them stayed enrolled, is the knowledge that their data is driving information into insight on a regular basis. That's going to be the thing that's going to make these things sticky compared to, turning it into a game or worrying about UX. It's, these people are in this to make knowledge from their data. And if you can show them that that is happening clearly, then that's going to be the number one most engaging thing we can do for a significant chunk of the population.
Thank you. I'm looking at the time, and we started a little bit late. We actually have only about 10 minutes before we want to open up for questions. So I want to be very focused and perhaps ask questions and have one person comment, the person who feels most qualified to comment on that, to speak up, and then we'll try to cover some other issues. So we've heard a lot about motivation and things that actually relate to recruitment and retention in a study. So I want to know, do any of you have experience that will tell us how good people are at providing data? What types of data will people give us, and how good are they at doing that? Through different means. Actually giving us the data. Let's assume that it's a participant who doesn't have a disease or a patient who does have a disease. What can we get that's not in the electronic medical record or from some other patient-independent manner?
Scary when they're next to you at the same time. I want to caution the limited nature of the examples I can give, because these studies are less than 90 days old, and all we're collecting sensor data from the phone, we're collecting survey data via the phone, and we're scraping data out of the health app on the phone. So, and that gives us a limited sort of quantified self set of information about the participants. The more passive the sensor task, the more data you collect. So in our breast cancer cognition study, one of the things we do is collect backspaces in the free text, because over time that gives you a sense of cognition improvement or decline. Now, with what's your typographic error rate over time? That's got a high participation rate. In the Parkinson's study, one of the things we do is ask you to put your phone into your pocket or your purse and take 20 steps forward and 20 steps back. And we record the gyroscopes and the accelerometers during that moment, and that gives us your gait and your balance. That's a much more invasive task because you have to sort of stop and take 20 steps back and forth. And so the less invasive the task and the more the task is understood, the more data that you collect out of it. The surveys, there's an enormous willingness to do those in bulk at the beginning. That decays very quickly. After that, you need to do sort of quiz style, 23andMe style stuff. That works pretty well. And then the other is that we're seeing something related to enrollment date, which is people who enrolled, at the beginning, we had this giant spike when we had the Apple keynote. And then there's this really organic growth since then. The people that are coming in that organic growth period are very highly engaged because they're learning about this from peers and the Parkinson's or the post-chemo community. And so they have a much higher willingness to contribute information on a regular basis than those who came in because of the press. And so the challenge that's in front of us now is how do we keep the people that are engaged in generating a lot of data doing that over time? We don't have longitudinal data about how to do that yet, but that's the thing that we are sort of obsessed with right now.
Brief addendum. To get 3 years of Medicare claims data takes approximately 45 seconds to download an app, maybe another minute to put in your Medicare-issued credentials, and you have your data. So it's very simple, and anyone can do it.
So you're talking about the participant providing data from a record, but then
they themselves
as opposed
have
to
downloaded.
about their things that only the participant knows. That's what I'm.
Correct.
I think that's part of what we're trying to get at here is things that only the participant can tell you.
Well, arguably, no one else but the participant can give you their Medicare data, and it's simple to get it, and it's crucial.
Okay, thanks. Kathy wanted to comment on that.
Just one quick thing is when we were doing the genomic studies and they're longitudinal and you're trying to follow these patients over a significant period of time, the relapse data is the most important. Where we actually ran into trouble on a very expensive study was the doctors didn't want to do the bone marrows. It wasn't that the patients didn't want to do it. They take a long time for a doctor to do. So then we had to use call centers to go back out to the patients to remind the doctor that you would raise your hand because the information was so critical and powerful. So sometimes you have to use all different media to try to get to these patients. And then the other piece is every time you give them more information, if they didn't fill out a questionnaire for us, every time they go back on, we have to remind them, we don't have this kind of specific information. You've told us you have bone pain, you have fatigue, but you haven't told us your staging or what type of myeloma you have. And then we teach them how to go back and ask their doctor for that information. But it does take a significant period of time, but they do end up filling it all in.
One more thing not to forget is the content that people create outside of health is enormously indicative of their health. So things like Gmail, you can do sentiment analysis on Gmail and learn an enormous amount about health. It's creepy. It's extremely creepy. But this is how we get served advertisements for Tylenol when we start searching for back pain. And so the things that people type on their devices are enormously indicative, and they're not captured in any of the traditional health systems. So this modulo creepiness, we need to remember that that's actually one of the pieces of their digital phenotype.
So it's very interesting. Maybe we need to know a lot more about these things. I want to go to a topic that is a little bit out of the box in terms of interacting, participants and patients interacting through the data. So what they get back, what other people know, the social network data. That's the antithesis of what we usually think about in terms of data, is that it's not influenced by other by other people during that time. So can you talk about the fact that some of the digital devices, the capture devices, are designed for social networking, like the exercise monitors or some of these things, and how is this going to enter into the new age of data collection from people?
So in the sleep world, we have anybody with sleep apnea is the gold standards that we're primarily using CPAP, continuous positive airway pressure, which monitors your sleep from the time you turn your machine on, your onset, how long it takes you to fall asleep, how many obstructive episodes or how many central sleep apnea episodes you have throughout your entire night, how much leaking you have. And normally in the traditional world, you would go and see your sleep doctor or your primary care 90 days later, and they would look at your data and they would help you adjust. Well, now with modern technology and with all this data going up into a cloud for all these machines, you should be able to, in real time, if patients were allowed to by law, look at their data, be able to figure out maybe this isn't the right mask for me, I'm leaking too much, I need to change my mask. And instead of having 90 days of incremental decline in the quality of their therapy, they would, in that first 24 hours, figure out the solution. Oh, this is the variable I need to change. And then the adherence rates go way up. Now, because of the way laws are written, patients aren't even theoretically allowed to download their own data and read it. They're only allowed to look at total usage and leakage. They're not allowed to look to see what kind of episodes they're having throughout the night. So that brings in environmental factors. So depending upon what part of the country you're in, your allergy exposure. There's a company that now is measuring light sensitivity, temperature sensitivity, and incorporating all of that into the equation, because until you learn how to manage your disease, you can't manage everything else in your life. So, go ahead.
I mean, this is an exquisitely tuned device for taking data about you and getting it to companies, right? It's sort of, we have to acknowledge that's what these are optimized for. And it's primarily used to stratify us in ways to sell us products. And the reality is that we can use many of the same features of the phone to stratify us from a health perspective. But this doesn't happen in a cultural vacuum, right? It happens in the context of NSA. It happens in the context of Google and Amazon. And what's beautiful about health is that we have this different regime that allows us to require informed consent, that allows us to require engagement and return, and all these things that we've lost, really, as consumers. So, I mean, it's incredible what you can do with this thing in terms of health if you don't care about the ethics. It's just incredible. If you don't care about the ethics. If you care about the ethics, you have to actually enroll people and ask them, right? But Google knows where you are in the building. I'm not kidding. Right? They know if your phone spends time at the drive-thru at McDonald's or at the gym. You know, Facebook knows that because Facebook is tracking your location when you're not logged into Facebook. That's their business. So the challenge is, how do we balance the capacity of the device with the very essential and important traditions of bioethics, informed consent, beneficence, and so forth? And it's not an insolvable problem. It's not even that complicated a problem. If we ask people and we tell them what the deal is and what the risks are and what the benefits are, some percentage of them will choose to join and share. Right? But these things, I mean, these things give you really, really accurate digital phenotypes of the people who carry them. And the wearables, I think wearables are going to become computables pretty quickly, because I sent 3 Fitbits through the wash before I started using my phone to track my steps.
Also just age-related. You know, an 85-year-old mother with melanoma is handling her melanoma much differently than I'm handling my myeloma, than my 21-year-old daughter, who just, you know, to put it in perspective, you know, I look at this and you put one of these on. Okay, there's the startup. I couldn't even figure out how to get started. So of course my daughter's just, you know, lining me up, and you get started, and then you're used to it. So now you maintain it, and you love the visual effect, and you keep moving with it. So, but for them, when you look at the age difference of how we're all going to manage disease, it looks like night and day. I say the same thing about an EHR. Everybody acts like all the patients are living and breathing, staring at their EHRs. I got to tell you, I live my life. Every patient I see hands me their iPad and says, "Kathy, what is this? Please tell me what numbers I'm looking at." There's so much information in here. I have no idea what to do with this. And I'll literally go, "There's really only 3 numbers you need to stare at. Let me tell you what they are." So I think that I love the blue button. I am 100% with you. But I think we can't even get patients to go in and do the password to get to their portal. And then we all have 3 or 4 of them. So how am I combining all of that data of 4 different portals that I have so you can all look at it? And I want you to look at it. But it's, you know, you get overwhelmed, and I think there's the inertia of getting things started whether it's a Fitbit, whether it's knowing your EHR, and then there's the simplicity of maintaining it once you've got people engaged. I think the first part's the hardest, and I think that's what we're facing with this whole project, right? There's the inertia of getting a big project like this started. Where do you begin? And you find the people that really want to do it, and you find that, and they're probably in this room, by the way, and you find who wants to share their data, you start merging them, and then you start to build on it, and you get those short-term wins. And I think we have to start figuring out within all these populations who's going to say, I really want to do this. I really want you to have my data, take it.
That's a tremendous and important point. And so one of the groups that's not in this room are designers. You would never have tech companies have a gathering like this and not have like a third of the room be interface designers. But we ignore the interaction. And that's really what you're talking about, is the interaction. I mean, the stuff that we did at Sage on consent, the reason it's been successful is not because we're geniuses. It's because we were some of the first people to apply the method of interaction design to informed consent. And so we're sort of the one-eyed man, right? It's not that we have 20/20 eyesight. And so we need to have interfaces that are sensitive to different populations, different communities. We need to have ethnographers. We need to have designers. Those are not words that you hear very often in the health system, and it's a tragedy.
So a quick point to reassure the audience. This is a supercomputer in your hand. If you want to make it highly encrypted and completely secure and totally non-porous, you can. So that's very important. It's so important that the NSA is upset about it. The FBI is upset about it. This thing is totally encrypted. So there are solutions where your data is literally in a lockbox on this device. It goes nowhere. That's point number one. Point number two, there are interface designers and mobile developers. I'm on a team that does just that cures the problem of hyperportalism, a new word I like, and puts your data together in an easy way. And yes, as doctors and researchers, we do want to teach our patients about what's wrong with them. And by exposing them to their data, we start, as you pointed out, to do that. Thank you.
Okay, so last question and quick answer so we can go into the Q&A. Is there any such thing as too much information? Assuming that you're explaining some things, you have a Kathy to help lead you through this. Is there any such thing as too much information to give back?
Well, the obvious example is in genetics, where you find mutations that have uncertain significance. So they're either not truncating mutations, they may be a splice site mutation or an enhancer mutation or something. I don't know, and none of us in the room know what to do with those. So giving back just unvarnished, you have a change in gene X, is not a good idea. Now, if it's an actionable mutation, that's a different subject. If it's a mutation that clearly is penetrant and will affect the patient's health, then we need to have a conversation about that kind of data. But I think we would agree on that.
We agree too. Even in our COMPASS trial, if you if there is a mutation that we can act on, your doctor knows that, and then they get notified by that based off of trials that we're opening. But we don't send all the information to the patients right now just because there's not a lot that we can do with the data right now that has implications. I will say, however, that when we look at the data, things came out of it that we wouldn't have gotten from pharma companies, like knowing if you started with triple drug, it was much better than you started with just 2 drugs. And we wouldn't have known that because pharma wasn't going to be doing those direct head-to-head comparisons. So, but getting that kind of information that's a clinical issue to a patient is really easy to do, as well as getting it to all the community oncologists. And I think that's where you get those short-term wins of what's your study telling you. You put it in consumer terms that a patient and a community, anybody can understand, and you start to move with that. And then eventually the data is going to get more and more technical. But if you threw all of that data to them at first, you'd just turn them off because they'd be so overwhelmed with everything you're giving them. It has to be in bite-sized pieces.
Yeah, what we're looking at is we're internally using the skiing system of blue, green, black diamond, double black diamond, because the idea is that we shouldn't decide what the right amount is ex ante, right? We should let the participant decide what the right amount is. And so some people don't want anything back at all, including insights. Some people want an annual report. Some people want quarterly reports. Some people want access to everything, including the variations of uncertain significance. And so the idea is that it's up to the patient or the participant to decide how much they want. We provide that to them at a level in a way that is structured into these sort of from everything to nothing and a couple of variations in between, so that people can choose. And so that if they decide that they want to put their variations of unknown significance into another study, they have the right from the very beginning to do that. But yeah, I mean, I can tell you, opening my own 23andMe file was one of the most depressing experiences of my life. I'm like, great, it's a bunch of letters and numbers. Like, what do I do? So I think and that's again where design and interface and sort of ethnography is really important. And too much of what we're doing right now, and I might need to learn more about what Christopher's doing, is sort of is back of the envelope design.
Adam, last word.
I'd just like to say there's always a lot of talk and research about training the patients. It probably needs to start to happen as the reverse, and that's training the researchers how to interact with the patients. I know that hasn't been the norm, but that's sort of where the world's going, and it might not be a bad idea for this cohort to really consider that as being the leader, because you've got millions of people on Facebook, Google, Twitter, everything every day, and they want questions, and it needs to be a two-way conversation, and it's starting to happen, but not at the speed that society's growing at.
Okay, thanks to the panel for really a sort of fast-track consideration of a lot of really important issues. So please come to the microphones with your questions, or if you have a microphone in front of you.
I'll take advantage
Josh,
of a microphone already here. So my question to you is, Chris, regarding use of blue button data, and anyone else that has any experience with it, but do you see, how many systems do you see that are actually providing complete medical records as opposed to just an encounter with that data? And I've downloaded the app, I've seen the streams, and so I'm curious also how much data you're getting outside of like CMS and stuff like that from Epic Systems, Cerner, Homegrown, et cetera.
So thanks to the work of the ONC, we do have standards in place today that support the exchange of data using a federal standard called DIRECT, which a little bit maligned. It actually does work and can work and will work to securely give individuals summary, structured data called CCDA that can be really long. I've heard companies saying, oh, it's too long, and I've heard other companies say it's too short. So on average, it's probably pretty good, and it's where we are today. This is a really key point in research and in life. We need to use the tools we have today to make patient care better and to get this research initiative going. We don't have to be limited to VA data. I think VA data is great, but it has a certain bias. So Epic, right now, today, uses DIRECT and can transmit records to a variety of apps, and we've demonstrated that with other PHR companies at the Interoperability Showcase. It's just starting. We need to push it. Thankfully, Dr. DeSalvo is pushing it like crazy, and this is really how we're going to make progress. We don't have to wait for FHIR. That's 2 or 3 years down the road. We can do a lot now.
Sure. I'd actually like to extrapolate a little bit from some things I've heard here and in the conference in general in terms of patient empowerment, patient engagement, the ownership of data by the patient, et cetera, and actually something that's happened on 23andMe over the last few years that I've had many both public and private discussions with Jamie Haywood about. My concern is that it's hard enough for patients to interpret their own data, Kathy, as you pointed out, when they get access to it. A concern is if patients have access to that data and it's their data and can bring it out and can get together in groups and analyze the data without researchers, and potentially through today's social media publicize the data and do studies that aren't propensity matched, that come to conclusions that are potentially not only wrong, but are potentially dangerously incorrect. And I'll use an example. There's a famous study of some work that was done at the beginning of statins, which showed that patients who were put on statins actually did substantially worse in terms of cardiovascular outcomes until you did a propensity match, and it actually, completely reversed itself, because obviously the sickest patients, the patients who needed the statins were, started on it. And so how do we strike a balance in which we empower patients and even give them access to data, but prevent us from being inundated with junk science, essentially?
Working with the patient groups when you can. I mean, for example, with us, there are many patients on Facebook, and they are all talking. And sometimes I even read and go, "Oh, geez, that's not really what I would, expect them to be doing." I think some of the things we're putting in play are things like a gateway where patients go in and you sign in. But if you are BRAF or you're 414, we have a researcher that is literally assigned to that group and is providing the data. So if they're, if our whole team is at ASCO or ASH, they're updating that information directly, and then the patients can chime in. So we try to manage that. And what I do find is for all the people on Facebook that are chatting, sometimes they'll come back and go, "Well, no, I actually read on this gateway. This was the right information." So we're trying to buffer that, but that part is a challenge because they're all going to go direct to Facebook, and you're trying to move them into the right spaces.
Thanks.
That's Claudia.
Hi. So many questions. John, I'd love to have you very intriguingly talked about the elements of governance, or the elements, the data return, ability to shape the protocol, and would just love to ask you to detail a little bit more what you see those pieces being, and then if we have time, hearing from any others on the group about whether they've also used those same principles in the work they've done.
So, I mean, we're a nonprofit open science org. We have a very specific set of biases that infuse our governance, right? Every organization is going to have bias that infuses its governance, and we try to be transparent about ours. Our governance is set up to try to create as many insights as possible. So we have a set of governance tools that govern the data use community. Those are our terms of service, our privacy policy for data users. And we have a set of tools that we use to try to increase the odds that people understand those. For example, we don't let people upload data to our system until they pass a test indicating they have the skills and the comprehension that they understand the implications of uploading human data to the cloud, coded data to the cloud. And that cut our uploaders from about 9,000 to about 700 when we implemented that. It's been very effective. We're looking into something similar that would allow people to access cohort of cohorts data out of our studies, which is that you'd have to identify yourself to use the data. You'd have to pass a skills test. You'd have to take an oath, maybe even a video oath, where you agree to basically not be a jerk, right? Not harm, not re-identify. Because the idea is we want to have intersectional tools that increase the odds that the data use is ethical. And that the data users comply with the idea of data return. And then we have the governance over the actual data collection, which is primarily around trying to make sure that people are as informed as possible. So we represent complex legal documents with icons, text labels, and a tiered sort of knowledge hierarchy structure that's been proven to communicate complex concepts. We open source all of these things so that anyone can grab them because they're methods, right? They're not products or platforms. And then we have technical governance, which is API monitoring, user monitoring, to make sure that if we see someone doing something weird, we can lock their account down and ask them why, what they're doing. And then on top of that, we have process-based governance, which makes sure that various people inside the organization don't have rights to access the data. So I can't see the study data because the process means that my IDs don't allow me to log in because I'm not part of the organization that needs to analyze the data. So that, to us, that's sort of the mix is, informing the participants, because for the most part, their role is to provide data to the study and then receive insights back. So we want to make sure they understand that. So we have, the interface tools, we have assessment tests, we use the surveys in the apps themselves to try to assess that. We have this mixture of process technology and legal on the actual data use side. And then we sort of convene a very regular group inside that draws data science, clinical science, IT, and governance together to make sure that what we're doing is cohesive enough. And then on top of that, we make sure that every study we run has the ability for free text comments coming in from the participants themselves, because they tell us the pieces of governance that we're missing on a pretty regular basis.
Thank you. Let me do a time check. We're almost at 11. We have 3 people standing. Can we take those 3 questions? Okay, good. Yeah, thank you. Yes, please.
My name is John Birch, and I'm an angel investor with a small angel investment group. I'm interested in I'm trying to get a grasp of the problem, Adam, that you at least referred to this morning about the data not being available, the data from the companies who make the devices. I think you mentioned one of the apnea or the CPAPs, and I know that's a widespread problem. I'm trying to get a grasp of how big a problem, how widespread a problem that is. I was astonished this morning. Representative Blackburn said there's 97,000 devices and apps out there. That's even a larger number than I knew, although I knew it was a pretty big number. And I'm sure in the Santa Clara meeting, a lot more discussion of this whole topic will go on. But doesn't HIPAA apply here? Isn't HIPAA at least a partial solution to some of this? Are these or are these not covered entities?
So, great question. The FTC has taken this on in a big way, had a spring privacy seminar series last year that I would direct you to look at on May 7th on this issue. So HIPAA does not cover data flows once a patient acquires the data, right? So if I download my data from a source like a HIPAA-covered entity, then HIPAA doesn't cover that. I think your question might be slightly different, which would be...
It's the other direction.
Yeah, data generated by a device, and I'm going
Yes.
to pass it on to Adam.
So, in the apnea world, there's the manufacturer, there's the DME, and then there's the patient. The manufacturer can't sell directly to the patient. We could say we want to advocate for that because somebody with 20 hours of training at a DME knows less than what a patient who lives with this disease 365 days, 7 days a week, for as long as time goes on. I mean, I'm without power and without the electric grid, I'm a dead man. The fact that Elon Musk is coming out with home batteries is the best news I've heard in the last year. Because my biggest fear is natural disaster, storm, there's power in my house, I know I'm going to be able to sleep. If I sleep, I can live and I can manage my life. So the manufacturers are putting all their data up in the cloud, but is it the manufacturer's data? Is it the DME's data? Or is it our data? And that hasn't been answered very clearly.
Okay, well, I guess this is a big, complex question. Maybe we're not going to deal with it here, but I just wanted to throw out that Representative Blackburn this morning also said that as a part of the Software Act they're working on, they're going to try to make more and more devices non-FDA, not requiring FDA approval, which would mean presumably that they're not going to be covered entities for sure. I don't know. Maybe is or isn't that the distinction? I just want to point out that I think this is a very critical kind of question that needs to be clarified relates to the problem of data ownership and a whole number of other things which I think could impede progress.
Yeah, I mean, the vast majority of these apps, devices are different than apps for the most part, although it's sort of an artificial distinction, but the vast majority of them fall under FTC, not under HIPAA. And there's a reason why they all say they're wellness apps as opposed to health apps. And that's, to avoid any sort of regulation whatsoever. And being FDA regulated doesn't necessarily create HIPAA. As Christopher pointed out, HIPAA has to do with where it is in the treatment system and the payment system, not the underlying nature of the data. So the general answer that we've come across is no, for the most part. The devices and the apps are creating data that is outside of HIPAA and therefore outside of the legislative rights we have to access. And just wait till those companies start going bankrupt and getting sold, because their data is going to be one of the core assets.
Yes. So, thank you.
I really appreciate this entire meeting. It's opened up a bunch of questions for not only the researchers but the patients. There was the point I think was brought up by Adam or Kathy was training the patients and the patients training the researchers. Perhaps the sweet spot is the researchers that become patients, because they become very, very proactive in what they're doing, and they realize immediately, as I did with my son. My son was diagnosed with neuroblastoma. I'm a cancer geneticist. My husband and I are at Salk and Scripps Research Institute. We actually performed a crude precision medicine approach to his treatment. We denied standard of care. We denied the bone marrow transplant because he was negative for the markers of aggressive neuroblastoma, despite the fact that histology said it was high-risk neuroblastoma. Today, he is 10 years later, he is a healthy 11-year-old boy with no long-term side effects. However, We know that the treatments that we used on him, he is slated for leukemia and everything else down the road in his early adulthood. Researchers also understand the essence of time. We don't have 10 years. We need to share data. We need to share samples. So I ask that the community reaches out to the researchers that were patients or parents of patients to help you guide what you're doing to move forward, because we understand the issues on both sides. The other thing I want to mention is that we're talking about devices. You know, I have a cell phone. It costs me $200 a month, you know, and have data coming in, data coming out. And we heard yesterday enrollment fees were $250 per patient. The devices we're talking about are extremely expensive. So how do we get those areas in rural areas that don't have access, or those in social economic challenged areas be able to have access to these devices and be able to learn how to use these devices? In San Diego, we have many families that don't have computers. We have nonprofits that refurbish science computers and give them out to their families and teach them how to use it. So how do we talk about reaching out to rural areas and social economic areas, but we're also talking about very expensive devices, and how do we bridge that gap?
So I'll take a shot at that. So the Pew Research follows this very carefully. Smartphone ownership in the U.S. is surprisingly well distributed among different socioeconomic classes and among different ethnic backgrounds. This is really quite shocking. You know, old white guys like me are kind of behind and catching up other groups. Now, your point, though, is well taken about the digital divide. I think mobile devices are starting to cure that. A low-end mobile device, an Android smartphone that's Wi-Fi that doesn't have, you know, a mobile subscription, you can go into Best Buy for $100 and get that device. That's less expensive than a lot of medicines we're giving patients on a per-monthly basis. So I think we are solving the digital divide. That doesn't mean your issue isn't important. But I see mobile devices as the way to conquer that problem rather than being part of the problem.
And it's also not just the device itself, right? Communities have different reactions to being surveilled, right? And so, I work with some people in Brooklyn who do environmental and climate justice. And if you show up with a clipboard, right, no one talks to you, right? You need to be embedded in the community. And so this, again, gets back to the importance of ethnography and cultural sensitivity to understand, what are the mechanisms for collection that are culturally appropriate for various groups, because what the phones will give us are the people that are comfortable with phones. That's the inherent bias we'll get. And my take is that's better than the bias we have now, which is people who know about clinical studies. But there needs to be a very multivariate, ethnographic approach to the way that we try to push this out into different communities.
Okay, so we'll have a quick comment and then the last question.
Just one quick comment, and that is, I think in order for patients to understand precision medicine, they actually need to hear stories like the one you just shared of what the difference was in precision medicine, and then get those stories out there, because I think Angelina Jolie probably educated more women on precision medicine than anybody else, and it can be real life stories, and it can be people that the consumer is going to trust to explain what we're really trying to do here.
So, a comment and then sort of one question. I think this panel is really great. Some of these ideas, both from the patient organization perspective as well as some of this new technology, there are real possibilities here that I can't even begin to imagine that you're already been working with. I wanted to note specifically about sort of the study process, the consenting, the sort of the dynamic nature that John Wilbanks was talking about, and returning data and that type of thing. Just as an example, we've been doing this in a study that I have where we've been following kids. They were 6 and 7 years old when they came into the study. We've been following them for 10 years now, funded by NIEHS. But what we did when the girls got a little bit older is we created a youth advisory board of study participants. So we actually let them look at our questionnaires and give us feedback. And they said, "Why aren't you asking more about alcohol? You need to be asking us about sexual practices." And these are kids who are like 11 and 12 years old and telling us that we should be doing this, and so we did actually do some of those things. We didn't do, everything that they suggested, but in our cycle, it takes a lot longer to implement these changes because it's, our IRB only meets once a month. They require everything to go through the full IRB almost, and that type of thing. So this gets back to some of the questions about policy changes and interpretation of regulations on an individual institutional basis, et cetera. And then we also have been giving them back their individual level results of biomarker measurements, phthalate, urinary phthalate measurements, et cetera, even though we don't know what to do with that. So I think it gets back to this question of, do you give back only actionable information or not? So anyway, getting to the question, which you don't have to answer, is, as Shariki knows, my main research area of interest is actually in food and nutrition. How can we leverage these technologies to actually capture what people are eating better? There's been a lot of progress in the physical activity space, but I don't know about the food and nutrition space.
So I'm actually going to jump in here because we're running way over time now, and we're going to have a workshop devoted to these topics in July. And so, Shariki, maybe you can wrap up.
It's amazing how much you can get into an hour, but also how many new questions you can generate. So I really want you to join me in thanking this panel for their tremendous input.
I have the pleasure of introducing the last panel of this session, talking about a perspectives on centralized and federated data models, which has been called a religious discussion, I think, twice yesterday. So perhaps we'll have a very passionate discussion here. We have three discussants here. Jeff Brown, immediately to my right here, Mark Overhage and John Walsh. I'll let each of them introduce themselves and their role and some of their initial views. Each of them has a perspective driven by their own experiences. So, Jeff.
Great. So it actually sounds like the war didn't happen. I'll just speak I'll speak closer. So it sounds like, just to get to your point, Josh, we started to settle around a pretty clear, we'll just call it hybrid approach, and I'm sure that's what we'll get into. But I didn't hear the battles yesterday as much as I kind of expected. So we'll see where this goes. So to introduce myself, so I sit at the Department of Population Medicine at Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare Institute, which is inside an insurance company. I'm an associate professor at Harvard Medical School. I've been involved with, I couldn't count them all up, about 15 or 20 distributed networks during my time, over about the last 10 years where I've been in this position. All distributed, all for different purposes. And I'm going to quickly go through a couple because I think it'll provide some framing of how hard it is going to be what you're doing, but how perfectly possible it is to achieve the goals that are being laid out. So a couple of the networks. One, Mini Sentinel. So inside Mini Sentinel, I am the associate director. What I'm really responsible for is the day-to-day operations. Mini Sentinel is funded by FDA with a very clear mission of we have to be able to answer medical product safety questions quickly. When someone at FDA calls, we have to be able to answer them in days, not months, not years. So it was a very clear, focused mission for us, and we had to build a system that met those needs. Some of those needs are defined person time. So you have to have essentially insurance data to do that. You need defined person time. I needed an incidence rate. So that drives the kinds of data you use. Speed was important, so we had to build a way of answering questions quickly. Number of users were important. So really, in one sense, there's one user. It's FDA. In another sense, there's thousands of users, which are all the people at FDA who could pick up the phone and ask us a question. In reality, how we've built it is we can have thousands of people asking questions. Those questions get filtered through a strong coordinating center, a single coordinating center, and that coordinating center is the actual group that answers the questions. So that's how we've organized that. That's a choice based on the design requirements, right? It didn't have to be that way, but it made sense to do that for FDA. We had a very high priority on data quality before we used the data. So this was, you had to, if you're going to answer questions tomorrow, you can't start worrying about the quality of the data that day. You have to do that work up front, but that's a requirement. I'll quickly move to another network to show this difference. We also have a Massachusetts Department of Public Health network set of set of providers in Massachusetts. That network's based on EHR data, completely EHR data. The idea is daily reporting of reportable diseases to the state. You can't check those data every night. So they are updating the data every night. We're running algorithms on it. Does someone have acute hepatitis? Yes or no? If so, send to state. Because you're supposed to do that. That's a requirement. Totally different model, different data model, different structure. Everything's different about that. It's still another distributed network. And I am now also at the coordinating center for PCORNet, where we have a requirement, or our requirements are a little more diverse, which is observational studies. Do them fast. I want to do a lot of them. There will be a lot of users. And to support pragmatic clinical trials. And those two aren't that easy to align. And that's one of the struggles we're going through at PCORNet, but it's a different set of data requirements. In Sentinel, we started with claims and added EHRs to add depth. In PCORNet, we're starting with EHRs and adding claims for the longitudinality and completeness. Two different use cases, so you'll probably hear me say a little bit more about use cases and design for purpose. And I won't tell you the punchline yet. I'll let Mark go.
So I'm Mark Overhage. I'm a health services researcher, general internist at heart, who found IT as a tool to help with that. And 4 years ago moved to industry. So I've been at Siemens, now Cerner. So learning that side and perspective of the business. And like Jeff, have touched a variety of networks and tools, including the Indiana Health Information Exchange and the Indiana Network for Patient Care, which were centrally hosted but federated models, as well as others. I really, it's always interesting to me, the convergent evolution, because I think we could have interchanged our notes and done just fine here. I think the major thing that I think we do have to do here is think really hard about the use case. And the use case, it seems to me, for this PMI group of patients, and I like the phrase resource that was used, is a very clear and specific one, at least in my mind. Not sure I've got the same one as everybody else. And that use case of highly leveraging a resource of patients to learn everything we can from their data is, let's put simply, will drive the answer to the question of how you want to approach managing the data in terms of federation and central management and the balance between those two. And I think it is always a balance. It's never purely one or the other.
So my name is John Walsh, and I'd like to thank the organizers, Francis and Bray, for inviting the patient perspective consistent throughout the meeting and these workshops, and the bold vision that's been projected here that we really think is it's an ethical imperative to do and make happen. I come at this from a different perspective. In that I was diagnosed with a genetic condition, alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, actually diagnosed at the NIH, and our community evolved as a result of a phase 4 study conducted at the NIH to actually map out the natural history of alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. So our community met at the study sites, 33 study sites around the country. We were introduced to each other. We evolved from participation in clinical research. So I think the emphasis on building a culture of the responsibility to participate in clinical research and the value proposition that can be created from that type of participation, that type of commitment, is really critical for us to focus on, moving forward. I also think that the value of a registry or a database or PMI, whatever, or PCORI, our Patient-Powered Research Network, PCORNet, is critical that people understand that value. We have 80% of individuals with alpha-1 in our registry database, which is patient-reported data right now. We're adding healthcare provider-reported data onto that data set. And we can recruit for a phase 3 pivotal study for a clinical trial in somewhere between 6 and 10 weeks in a condition that we've identified about 10,000 individuals across the country in. We need to do the same thing in COPD. So 10 years ago when we started the COPD Foundation, we looked at the Alpha-1 model and what we've been able to create. We created a COPD patient registry that's patient-reported data. That's not good enough. It needs to be beyond that. We created a non-CF-related bronchiectasis research registry that's the largest one in the world now. We worked with the COPD Gene Project, the largest project ever funded by the NIH for pulmonary research, and built a cohort of 10,300 study subjects fully characterized, including GWAS, and the benefit of that. And we're very proud to be a part of the PCORNet, PCORI as a COPD PPRN, and the value of being able to recruit for, enroll in that network is critically important to us. The focus on comorbidities, where 65% of individuals with COPD in America today have 6 to 10 comorbidities. The focus on the whole patient, the ability to cross-fertilize information or queries from one data set to another, one disease condition to another, is very important. So the discussion on a centralized versus a federated data platform is critically important. The elephants in the room are obvious. The IRB, the INIRB right now is institutional liability. It's not individual human research protection. Informed consents are not understandable and this needs to be addressed. And we're delighted as a patient community to see this focused on now, before launching PMI in an official way, to fix these issues and make certain that we are all harmonized on how we move forward are critically important. If we can go into the EMRs and the EHRs, if the billing systems, if we can go into them, if there's a line of code that restricts being able to integrate or make them interoperable, let's fix that. That's inexcusable that we can't go to one institution or one facility and be able to have access to our medical information. Nothing about us without us from the patient community perspective, as Kathy and Adam so nicely articulated. We need to be involved in the decision process. We have the capability to be educated, inform, educate, empower, and engage, to be involved in identifying research objectives. And it's critically important that we have forums like this and carry forward and engage the community and build a value proposition that's meaningful to the individual affected, whether you call it participant or patient or inpatient patient. We need to be at the table. We need to be participating in the process. So thank you all for making that happen and for your commitment to that.
Thank you all for that. As we start to, so I think I heard everyone kind of talk about a hybrid approach here. And I think that's something that's come out through the last day and a half, that there are components, especially if you think about combining resources across different domains of information, that by necessity will come from different places. But I want to push on that a little bit more. There is a component for which, if we think about having centralization versus federation, that anytime you want to query something, you're querying at each of the sites versus bringing the sites together and storing it, or maybe you're storing some of the data versus all of the data centrally. As we think I think for right now, we might want to not focus too much on the different domains of knowledge, but just assume that we have similar domains of information or data coming in, and what that would look like. And where do you guys sit on the question of everything federated dynamically, everything stored centrally that you actually want to use in some core element?
If you go in the same order, or we can shift like poker.
You can shift, yes.
But I'll start this way. So I'm on the button. So I would, I described how I've spent my last 10 years developing distributed networks. We've developed software to make distributed networks work. I think the idea here is don't do it. As I would say, please don't unless you have to. So in fact, every time I talk to anyone who's going to start a big study and they need tens of millions of people, my answer is if you can do it at one place, do it at one place. If you need more than one institution, fine, but it's much more complicated to do. I think where we're going to end up here is some form of hybrid. I would suggest some central core set of data elements that can actually answer lots of questions. It might be, the question I think will be how deep that core set of elements go, leaving some of the details back at the nodes that can be grabbed and standardized as needed. So I think we talked about this a little earlier. You don't want to do an assay on everyone for everything. Do it when you need to. That's in my world. You don't need to do a chart review on everyone. Do it on the set of folks you need, or go grab their radiology results, the actual radiology, the details only if you need them. But you need to know what happened. You need to know it's there, and then only go and view the film for the people you need. For example, how deep that goes will be an interesting debate. I think the nation has built lots of resources so far. Sentinel's a nice resource of claims data. It's built, it's standardized. That's a thin layer. PCORNet's building an additional deeper layer that has EHR data. So now you can go a little bit deeper. And then there'll be lots of other initiatives around the country that can go a little bit deeper. But a core set, and I'm probably going to the next question, is a core set of data elements I think is critical that can actually answer questions, not just lead you somewhere else. And that has to be fully curated. Curate. Make sure that you can actually use that to answer questions and not every time try to figure out how to use it.
This is going to be a really easy panel, I think. No, I would echo, I think, most of what Jeff just said. And I even during this meeting, I kept turning the dial for myself more towards centralized. And I might add a couple thoughts to what Jeff shared. One is an important thing. I agree completely. You want to be curating the data as it's coming in, doing the quality assurance as it's coming in. But at the same time, I think it's really critical to retain the core original data and not too soon abstract it out. And a great example of that, I think, is the recent work that's been done looking at ECG waveform analysis, where you can extract data from the signal that an expert cardiologist cannot see. In other words, two cardiologists looking at the two tracings says same tracing, but when you really look at the detailed data, the millivolt deflections time by time, there's variation that classifies patients into different risk categories. Who knew? Right? I certainly did in medical school. So I think it's really important that we capture the raw data in as raw a form as available. And if it's, you said films, it just shows how old you are. It's
just I'm not a dog.
the bitmaps, the digital images, are going to be analyzed and reanalyzed by bright people in 100 different ways that we don't anticipate. So we shouldn't ever lose fidelity of data. Now, we want to curate it. We want to make it usable. People talked about extracting knowledge from it, and so on. So you want the QRS measurement pulled out of the ECG tracing and stored as a data value so that people can use it who aren't sophisticated or interested or whatever. And so you want both. And one of the and so that's sort of analysis and reanalysis, because these things are going to get cranked a dozen times. A mammography is a great example. At Siemens, we did lots of work on automated image analysis, as you might imagine. And the algorithm for detecting abnormalities in mammogram is now in its 137th iteration. It's not static. And so that reanalysis that's going to happen is really drives me heavily towards as much as we can centralize as soon as we can centralize, given this particular use case. The other factor, about that drives that is the demands on the related systems. And Rory talked about this issue of, specimens are finite, right? There's only so much blood from June 3rd, 2003. Well, there's also finite participant patients. I can only ask you so many questions today. And you heard with some of the examples of even with the research kit and things like that, people have limited bandwidth and capacity, even if they're motivated and interested. I've got a life to live. And then but other things as well, like additional data, take a lot of effort. And so those are resources that the management of this data set, this patient resource, are going to have to carefully curate. They're going to have to be very thoughtful about when do I use that ability to reach back to the institution where the patient had an ED visit and get data that wasn't available electronically, for example, because it's very precious resource. Not only is it not free, but simply the organizational bandwidth and capability to do that are going to be limited. So I think that's the federated part. There's going to be resources, things that are federated that are going to have to come from other places, but they're going to have to be incredibly carefully managed. And I think the management of that is going to be one of the major challenges here. And I know that we had a panel really about this, but who can look at this data. So in our Indiana experience, we really had, it was amazing to me the difficulty we had figuring out who was a qualified researcher, who was going to protect the patient's interest, who was going to be credible in their methods, who was going to, and if it's just using data, it can be a little looser, but if you're using these other consumable resources that are finite, you better be very careful about prioritizing those. And you need the patients who are engaged, you need the folks who understand the national priorities for where our healthcare pain points are to help prioritize how those consumable resources get used.
So we obviously would have to right now lean towards a hybrid model. I think that there's nobody in the voluntary health sector that would just give up their registries or their database into a central platform. Just the reconsenting process itself would be a nightmare. There are comorbidities related to COPD, for example. The highest comorbidity, second highest comorbidity is depression and anxiety. There's a lot of people that would give their CT scans and their GWAS and all of their clinical data, but don't want anybody to know they're on an antidepressant or other types of medications related to a health condition they might have. So STDs and mental health specifically. So I think we really have to be flexible as to what types of data people are going to be comfortable sharing, and listen to the individual affected. If we don't take advantage of what is already out there, and in PCORI we're building a mega potential for not only the research community but to improve health outcomes. And it would be a shame if we didn't take advantage of the infrastructure being created with PCORI, and whether the CDRNs or the PPRNs, and the importance of taking that information and utilizing them. VA, Carolina Health Systems, Kaiser Permanente, Intermountain, all could build databases of well over 1 million people with limited challenges. The lung cancer screening program, we're working closely with the Lung Cancer Alliance. It would be shameful if we don't take that image the CMS is already paying for, of 8 million Americans between 55 and 75 with 30-pack years of smoking, and don't look for COPD and other lung conditions and heart conditions, for that matter, that are caused by tobacco exposure. So let's take that image and make sure they're read thoroughly, and take that share my scan concept that the Lung Cancer Alliance is using, and inform individuals that you can actually go and request a copy of your scan and give it to whomever you want. The COPD gene study has demonstrated to us that you can subphenotype COPD into 6 or 7 subphenotypes and focus drug development on those specific areas with just a CT image. So is that almost as good as an electronic health record? Maybe it gets us part of the way there. So I think we really need to be flexible as we look towards what are the resources that have already been created. Let's not reinvent the wheel. What do we need? Obviously, we need a common data set to be able to compare multiple chronic conditions and health status. I think on the genetic side, it's critically important to think about genetics and predisposition to genetic conditions. We have to have a cohort that includes children. I mean, if we don't, 10 years, 20 years from now, if we look back and said we didn't bring the children into this because it was too sensitive, it was too political, it's absolutely critical. Let's follow those that have a genetic modifier that we don't know. I think Rory or somebody said it earlier, that we don't have a clue what it really means. But let's follow that environmental exposure. Let's follow the health condition and the other comorbidities and how that impacts somebody with a genetic predisposition or a genetic condition that's identified. So I just think right now in where we are, we're stuck with not stuck, but we probably have the challenge of building a hybrid model. Wouldn't it be nice, because it's participant controlled, hopefully in the end, that it could be a centralized data platform, but it's not going to be everything for everybody.
Great. As we think about some of the points that have been brought up earlier, I want to go back to Mike and Rory's comment about our 4 C's and our D. So collect, catalog, clean, curate, and defer. And as we think about centralization and federation as models here, and we realize that we potentially won't be able to centralize everything for a variety of reasons. How do you think about those elements in this data versus information tension? Because we could get all the data without converting it all into what we'd call meaningful information and allow the semantics of that to come later in that whole collect, clean, catalog, etc. C's and D's.
We're moving the button.
So, move the button.
But just as a quick answer to that, my leaning is towards collect everything, dirty though it may be, that you can up front. And folks yesterday talked about early and late binding, and I think that was one of the things they were talking about is clean, curate, and collate the things that you can up front. And I think Rory talked about this. Do all those things up front that you can, but defer the things you need to prioritize. Defer the things that are lower priority. But your opportunity to collect something again is always going to be harder. It's going to diminish. It's going to get further away. And many things, for example, lab results from a laboratory, it's way easier just to get all the lab results and figure out what they are later if you need to, than it is to go back later and get the other 10 that you, for whatever reason, chose not to get. So I guess that'd be my suggestion for balance.
I can't spell balance.
So you're gonna have to spend. I like the 4 C's. I think it makes a lot of sense, and I agree. I'm gonna echo Mark's point of maintaining the raw, and I think there's really very little reason to manipulate the data that's coming out if it's reasonably well standardized already. It's about understanding it versus changing it. So I'm pretty strongly against lots of mappings for no reason. Map when you need to map. Don't start mapping the stuff because you've actually changed the meaning when you've mapped it. We know how to handle ICD-9 codes in a hospital setting. Don't pretend it was a LOINC code. It wasn't. And now none of the algorithms we've built over the last 20 years work because you've made it into a LOIC. And so you leave it at that raw form. There will be things you have to map. I mean, just because they're so messy or it's local. Only Indiana knows. I know you're not there anymore. Only Indiana knows what **/ means in hemoglobin, which. Look, you see the stuff, right? I mean, you see /Bob, and you see all sorts of things in there. That will be meaningless no matter what we do unless we map. But you leave it at a raw form, and I think in time I've learned the investigators, even for phenotypes, don't bother trying to define diabetes for someone, because the next researcher is going to say that's almost right. But I want 2 of these and 1 of those. So you leave it and let the researchers do it, and What I typically want to do is build tools to make it faster to do those things, but let's not pretend that any of the definitions we've come up with or the past ones, and I don't know, everyone's always said no when we give them nice, clean definitions. So I stopped doing it, actually.
That you can't centralize everything. Could you be more explicit about what you think the limits are to what can be centralized and what can't?
I was kind of jumping back to what John's point was, that some of these registry informations, they may not want to freely give away, and you could encounter situations where different groups, for various reasons, either couldn't, for some technological reason, actually share given bits of data. For instance, if we wanted to share image data at this point, we couldn't broadly share image data electronically, though maybe some point in the future we could, and we certainly could go back and look at certain types of images. So you could imagine scenarios where technological or just procedural or consent-based mechanisms would prohibit sharing all the information forward.
This is my chance to attack Jeff, which I always look forward to doing.
Glad you're here.
Having worked together. I'm having trouble reconciling the thing that you just said. So I understand that many researchers will want to redefine even the most fundamental terms. But on the other hand, if you're creating a national resource, well, if we just take Sentinel, for example, you're not redefining every term every time you do an analysis, are you? Or can you do it in 2 days just because you have complete control over a small group of people who do that? You know, I'm worried that if you never define anything, you'll end up with all these publications that don't match because everybody's made a slight change in the definition.
If only I knew someone at FDA who could really get everyone to agree on single definition. So what we do, it's a great question, Rob. We'll create those definitions as algorithms, but not insert them in the data. So that we will always start with, so stroke is a nice example. Stroke's an outcome we're going to reuse. Let's get a good definition of stroke, but that definition of stroke is just codes. And then when our colleagues at FDA come and say the outcome is stroke, we say, would you like to use this one? This is the one we used the last 3 times.
So for those who don't do this for a living, I mean, what I'm interpreting you to say is you actually do have a definition for stroke. It's a set of codes, and the regular researcher who will not want to redefine stroke would just use it as part of the analysis. Doesn't have to redo the code.
Yeah, let me throw a wrench into that for you. Stroke is an outcome. Stroke as a covariate, stroke as an exclusion criteria, what actually might be defined differently.
Yep.
Right,
And
so that's why.
And though I'm the moderator, I'll take the prerogative to jump in and share experiences from eMERGE. You know, the balance, I think, on how you want to define these depends on your definition of the disease, and as well as sensitivity and the positive predictive value of the variable you're looking for. So if you're looking at it as an outcome, the positive predictive value typically is tuned to be very high. If you're looking at it as an exclusion term, you probably tend towards more sensitivity. If we could develop an algorithm that had perfect sensitivity and precision, then we probably could have one definition. That being said, if you look across eMERGE and some of the algorithms we publish there, they have been adopted by lots of different groups, and certainly our diabetes algorithm as an example, type 2 diabetes to be a little more specific, has been adopted a lot across other networks and continues to get reused within eMERGE, though I know that there are other diabetes algorithms out there, and you can evaluate and compare the effectiveness and differences between them. So I think there can be reuse. I think we see examples of that.
Yeah. In fact, I'll just add one other thing, because this is daily that we go through this stuff with Sentinel, and if you can build the system so that you can ask questions quickly, or in one batch ask several, what we actually do often, Rob, and everyone else, is include a couple slightly different definitions to make sure that our definition's not driving the answer. So that's the sensitivity analysis of, let's try this very precise definition, a little bit more broader, a little bit broader, and see whether that matters at all. And if you can build a system so that that's not a huge undertaking, that's great. So in Sentinel, that's just another line of code. It's really, that's easy. We can do that all the time, but we built it because of that. We built it that way so we could handle those.
Just one way, I guess I think about this a little bit, are we trying to build something that is for the high priests, or is it a democratic research platform, right? And traditionally we've built things for the high priests and, the anointed three that can access the data. And what I think we're trying to do is get a much more democratic approach. And Rob, I think this gets to the core of your question, which is when you make it democratic, sometimes you have to put certain constraints in. Otherwise, you end up with difficult to interpret, difficult to reconcile answers. And I think that's one of the balances that has to be struck. But I think we're trying to get to a democratic platform that, whether it's a citizen researcher, an academic researcher, whatever, they could go ask a reasonable question, get a reasonable answer, might not be perfect, and then the ability to go further.
And I'd like to chime in. I really hope that, and I know everybody's focused on improving health outcomes and ultimately new therapies that are going to really make a difference in people's lives. But, just an image, the COPD gene study identified a very large cohort, about a third, that had no evidence of lung decline, no symptoms of COPD, and yet specific evidence of deterioration of lung tissue by CT scan. Wouldn't it be nice, and this is the vision that we have to project to the patient communities, being realistic about it, if you could develop a therapy that would stop it dead in its tracks before you even know you had it, except for by image. And the technology is becoming available to be able to accomplish that. But I really think as we build this platform, as PMI becomes a reality, that reality has to include being able to do things just like that. Stop it before you know you have it.
I think let's go ahead and start moving to questions from the audience. The line is longer on this side, so we'll start here. Then we'll alternate.
Okay, thanks. So these are issues that we've struggled with a great deal, and I actually want to propose an alternative paradigm of thinking about this, because I hear people continue to talk about core data sets. Let's think about core competencies, okay, as to in this hybrid type model, which is that a core competency, the central data set would be around a core competency of gathering together electronic health record and claims data and putting that into, that's the natural place to be the hub, if you will. But then when there's a specific core competency, whether it's based on expertise, the management of genomic data, the management of image data, or whether it's based on special attention, a COPD registry, a myocardial infarction registry, or whatever, that's the place where it makes sense, because the core competency in talent or focus is outside, and that what you need to connect are the links between those. And the other thing that's very important is that in each of those core competencies, there is all that interpretation, that forensic analysis of what the data, and it has to be curated, it has to be mapped, and gender has to be mapped if you're getting it from 50 different places, because there, or any of it's not just stroke, it's just about everything. But those places know and are able to, if you need to go into more detail, go after the forensic analysis of everything. Whereas if you centralize everything, you lose the ability to do the forensic data, going after the raw and original data. So I'd like to just suggest that core competency federation with centralized centralized around each of those core competencies is probably a good model. Any responses? Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah. The question was curated and data analysis. Does it mean the same thing? I think a little bit, though, it depends on the eye of the beholder of what kind of analysis you're doing, because there's an analysis technique to actually find what kinds of different variables and different variable ranges and all that kind of stuff that happens, and you can actually do analysis over very noisy data with lots and lots of data. This is sort of the Google approach, and discover interesting things. So in a lot of analyses, a lot of times we want that data ready stage is actually curated data, but. Does anyone?
I think it is important to recognize that there will be core competencies, and we should let the people who know best how to do those do them, and then those linkages are going to be the important things, because now we have to start stitching things together. So that makes an awful lot of sense. And you said something that's actually really important, I think, is not losing the connection back to the original data holder, if you want to call them that, original site, because they know their data best, and those you can't lose that. You can't throw the data over the wall and hope it's going to work well. So making sure that those connections are maintained.
My favorite gender example is a study that defined gender as M and F, and where M was mother, F was father. So, all right, Brad.
That was great. I want to drill down a little bit further in terms of explicit recommendations of what you guys believe. To what extent, so at some point, these million individuals, or whatever number is agreed upon, needs to be set, at which point data needs to be collected, it needs to be, Mike had great 4 C's, I can't remember what they are. But, so, should the centralized model be there for when the data in this population is defined, and should the federated model be used when we're trying to discover who these million individuals should be? I mean, it seems strange to me that I've heard a couple of conflicts, right? I've heard somebody say that centralization is good, and then I've heard federation is good. Yes, there's some religious fanaticism here, but where should we be going with this? So when do we use one versus the other?
I really like your question, Brad. Let me just modify it a tad.
Well, please do.
Should the centralization happen once we have curated data versus the federation, regardless of whether the cohort's already selected or not?
Yeah,
Let's just say the federation could be all the raw data, and the core centralization could just be curated data ever growing.
I'll take a crack at it at my peril. I think the question of how to recruit these patients is a really important one. And I think there's going to be a lot more water to go under the bridge in that. I can imagine a variety of different approaches to that based on, issues about how we land in terms of what questions we're trying to answer, how broad and representative we're trying. I mean, there's some trade-offs to be made there, and I think that will define how we recruit the cohort, and that might involve all kinds of data sources, or maybe it's just a national lottery. I don't know, but I would argue if the day you collect the first bit of data, it's heavily centralized on the first member of this data resource.
Mark Frissy from Vanderbilt. I want to talk specifically about the Indiana and Massachusetts experience with clinical health information exchange. A lot of discussion swirling around whether or not these systems designed and with enormous stimuli are going to be useful for more than just direct patient care, and specifically your own experience and where the Massachusetts or the Indiana Health Exchange have worked for the kind of aims we've talked about, and the limitations of where they haven't, and what you would do to make it different.
Well, I can't speak for Massachusetts, so that'll be easy. Because I really, the network I described existed before that exchange and is not related to it. And I'm not going to go anywhere else near the Massachusetts exchange. I actually don't know how it's going. Mark might know.
Yeah, well, in terms of the Indiana work, we chose a federated model but centrally managed. So what that means is everybody's data is actually in one single data center on one cluster of machines, but separated on those machines. So we cheated, right? We got all the benefits of centralization with the benefits that are more political, social, whatever of federation and segregation, and that's worked really well. And that's a variant of the model that I think works okay, and that's worked well for doing well over 8,000 studies have been run against that with a population of around 20 million people. The studies obviously on subsets of those, so I think there's evidence it works.
I do want to make, so health information exchanges in general, you will see care. What you won't see is not care. Mm-hmm. Right, so it's, sometimes I call it when you're doing some types of research, the absence of care has to be meaningful. You have to know it didn't happen. Mm-hmm. So there's some things you can do with those data. I'm really hesitant to overemphasize that stream or any other specific stream because it's always these pros and cons.
And I think that raised a really good point. And another one of my arguments for centralization, which is there's a lot of data that is not sort of routine clinical care data that we're going to want and need for this patient resource, whether it's patient-reported, patient self-generated outcomes and data. Where in the heck do you put that? Well, you're going to have a place to put it. But also, the logical place to bring together in Indiana, we certainly did this with claims data. Well, that's just part of the resource. It's not something you segregate. So I agree completely with that you need, it's not just the clinical data that gets you there because, for example, claims data helps your confidence level that no care was delivered because most people end up billing at least for the care that got delivered, mostly.
And Mark didn't say it, but the centralized federated model is essentially the model used in Memphis too for that HIE. John, I think.
I wanted to, I think this amounts to making another case for a centralized model, but has anyone looked at the approximate amounts of data that would actually be in existence for someone who was 0 years old today, but 70 years old 70 years from now, and has a typical health history at that point? The data requirements there, at what point do we archive data for a subject? I'm looking obviously not to the PMI, but to the practice of precise medicine, as I put it. How's that going to be handled? And where do we put the archive? How quickly accessible? How do we decide when it maybe needs to be faster, accessible for emergency situations or not? And just to add that yet one further level, I think it's worth keeping in mind that today's healthcare data is tomorrow's family history. And one of the things that came out at the last workshop was that family history is really critical. And so how do we handle all of that?
So I can give a real short version of it. One is the data needs are not bad. We have data, as many other people in the room here do, going back decades. And the trick is EMRs carry a lot of baggage, right? A laboratory system, a laboratory result, a single result is tens of K of data. It can typically be reduced down to on the order of tens of bytes of data for the purposes of most kinds of research. There's detailed operational research things and so on where you might want to know who was the technician who ran the machine on Thursday evening and whatever. But assuming that you're a little higher up than that in terms of the hierarchy, the data storage is a total non-issue. And my CTO guys always cringe when I say this, but storage is free. I mean, I know it's not, but it's effectively free. And the cost of acquiring and managing the data is so much greater than the actual cost of storage. We should never archive anything, and there's just no reason to.
That's at least true for the EHR.
So just a quick comment, because I know we're running out of time. Rachel Florence from PCORI. So we've had a lot of experience over the last 18 months engaging with patients. And John, maybe you can answer my point here. So we're discussing a fairly technical solution to, I think, what's a wider problem. And maybe instead of talking about recruitment, we talked about engagement. And I'm wondering if the panel thinks that if we engaged the patient communities and the wider communities more broadly, these technical solutions would actually be much easier to implement because you'd have that kind of groundswell support. And are the things that we're doing wrong in terms of how we're framing the conversation in terms of getting that groundswell support, where all of us in this room, as wearing our hats as patients, caregivers, parents, would actually be really willing to work much more easily with you if we really understood what the incentive was for us to sort of participate in the conversation. So I guess my question is around, would the technical solutions be easier if we if we frame the conversation differently with our communities? So maybe John.
No, I think that's a good point, Rachel. We have a social platform, COPD 360 Social, that have thousands of patients on it every day. And there are questions that people bring up, and they're answered by several people, different perspectives, and somewhat monitored but not controlled. And I think bringing the PMI, we will bring this PMI, forefront in the discussion process on the social media platform, but that needs to be done across disease states. That needs to be done in a much more public way, and engage individuals into what they see. Even just the use of the word cohort, it's not 3 syllables, but cohort, nobody knows what a cohort is, in the real world, and very few people would know what a cohort was. So I think we need to engage the public in that discussion and have them be part of it, because if they don't feel ownership, they're not going to be involved. If we don't build a culture like I talked about before, and they don't realize the benefit or what we're trying to accomplish, and ask them what they want us to accomplish, then it won't be embraced. And I think that's the true meaning of engagement, is to, inform, educate, empower, and engage. And we need to do that by having a discussion and asking opinions and sharing ideas.
Great. And we are running out of time. Mike, you had a quick comment.
Federated, but the institutional memory that goes along with it, and the people that use the data for years and years and years. And we've done some internal experiments where we had one group develop an algorithm and another group try to implement it. There are many, many, many moving parts to that, and we got different results. We sort of sorted through what the problems were, but it's not as simple as just taking data from multiple different organizations and dumping it into one little.
Great point. I'll let you have the last comment.
Shazarodnik, CareVerse, and the Harvard Personal Genome Project. So precision medicine is something we're pursuing, globally. The whole world is pursuing this. And I'm wondering if, when we think about federation, if we can think about it a little bit more globally. I mean, the Global Alliance for Genomics and Health, many of us are very actively involved, is modeled quite closely after the W3C that's made the internet a big success. But I think that something that is a tiny bit underappreciated is what also made that a success was a kind of an interesting competition between open source implementations of the standards of the W3C and proprietary implementations. That competition was very fruitful. And so I wonder, as we build this cohort and we think about federation, can we think about it at an international scale? And can we think about fostering that competition so that there are complete open source implementations of the core standards that can then compete with proprietary implementations? It's an idea I've thought about for many years. I think it would be fruitful for us to think about.
It's a great point. I think one of the I think maybe we won't directly answer it, because I think we could spend a lot of time talking about it, unless anyone has a brief comment they want to share.
Well, I think it's a great point. So what can be the open source? It might be the model of that core. And then the smartest person who figures out how to use those data well, they'll get the most use out of it. I mean, you can think of it that way, as you're building tools on top of a model. That's how lots of other industries will do it. The airline industry and health insurance to some extent, and some others, they have a model, and then software vendors fight to make it work well for them, and that can work here.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I'm gonna let's thank all our panelists, and then now to Kathy to close up.
thanks, Josh, and to, I think, the third all-male panel of the meeting. It was outstanding. I want to make a couple logistic comments and then have Francis Collins have the last word. So the first thing is we have a request for information that just got published, and you can find it on the Precision Medicine Initiative website at NIH. It has a long URL, so I won't read it out to you. And it is specifically asking for input on ways to engage individuals and communities, and that will be open for comment until June 19th. So please do comment on that. We will carefully review and incorporate your input into our deliberations. The second thing is that we will give some real thought to how we can encourage a renaming of the cohort and how we can solicit all of your ideas on a renaming of the cohort, as we have been exhorted to do, and also in clever ways to solicit input on research questions that can be posed to the cohort as it gets up and running. So this meeting has given the working group an enormous amount of great insight and information to chew on, but we don't have very much time face-to-face to chew on it. And so we are going to end early as soon as Francis wraps us up. And then this room is going to be converted into the room for the closed working group meeting. And so if, after we conclude, everybody can move rapidly out and the working group can move rapidly back in, that will give us maximum time to be able to think deep thoughts about what all you have shared with us during the course of this day and a half. So with that, I'll turn it over to Francis to wrap us up.
Well, it has indeed been a very intense and interesting day and a half. Certainly for myself, I feel as if we got a lot of really important material out on the table and moved the needle in a direction of greater specificity of what this enterprise, formerly known as a cohort, might actually look like. I guess for the moment we'll call it a resource. I guess I like that as an alternative. But maybe we need to work a little harder on that too. It'd be nice to have a catchy name for this that everybody would go, oh wow, that's so cool. And I'm not sure cohort or resource quite does it. So yeah, we'll keep working on that, and ideas are most welcome. I also really liked the idea, and Kathy just mentioned this, of trying to solicit some additional ideas about early wins that could come out of this effort once we're beginning to see what the shape is, ways in which we could make sure that we don't miss the chance to actually have some successes to gain further momentum and keep the sustainability of this up front. I thought the conversations we had throughout the course of this day and a half about inclusiveness and making sure that however we design this is very sensitized to those issues were extremely useful. And obviously we'll come back to those in even greater intensity on July 1st and 2nd with this next workshop at NIH, which is focused on participants. And I must say the discussion this morning about core data elements and what we want to try to be sure to think about in terms of what gets collected and curated was extremely illuminating. And there's a lot of experience represented on that panel and in this room that I think can help us a lot as we try to put some more specificity into this. So I guess I want to say how much I appreciate all the thoughtfulness that all the speakers put into this, many of you coming from some distance, giving up time for this effort. We really have to be extremely appreciative, and we are. And to the working group who have basically signed on for this, some of them probably without complete warning about how life-consuming it was going to be. Some of them have gone above and beyond the call of duty. One of them even gave me a tie because I forgot to pack one, so Josh, thank you. I didn't want to get caught in front of members of Congress with inappropriate garb, so you've saved my reputation. And well, right, amazing. I know I asked the right guy. He had at least one anyway. He was willing to spare. He offered me two, actually. One of them looked like it maybe came from a comedy show, so we decided not to put that one on. It's from Dan's Closet. Oh, okay. Josh also explained he was colorblind. That was his excuse. Well, the working group's got their work cut out for them here this afternoon. And again, as Kathy has just mentioned, we want to give them as much time as possible. So all that I want to now do is just to say a word of thank you, particularly to the staff that have worked so hard to put this together and who probably haven't gotten nearly the credit that they deserve. And that would include from NIH, Allison Lee, Lauren Milner, and Gwen Jenkins, and from Vanderbilt, Melissa Basford and Molly Bowden. And, of course, a particular thanks to Kathy Hudson, who has been overseeing the planning and the conduct of this particular enterprise as an all-consuming part of her life experience. And to our co-chairs, to Bray and to Rick, thank you all also for the way in which you've helped get us to this point and all the work that still remains to be done. So shall we give all those folks a round of applause, and then we are adjourned.